Coming in at number 10, what if the Hulk went berserk? This one revisits the origin of the Hulk and how Banner saved Rick Jones from the Gamma Bomb explosion. But in an alternate reality, Bruce Banner takes slightly longer in his attempt to rescue Rick Jones and is unable to push him into the hole that shields him from the blast. In this reality, only his body shields Rick Jones and they both take a substantial dose of gamma. The result being that the Hulk and Rick Jones now share a psychic link, with the Hulk being able to feel Rick Jones's pain. This new unique trait is picked up by Thunderbolt Ross pretty quickly, who then uses the knowledge to inflict additional torment on Rick, hoping to lure the Hulk back to the base. Due to the torture and his radiation sickness, Rick Jones ultimately perishes and the Hulk goes even more berserk when he detects this, destroying numerous military helicopters and tanks in his quest to seek revenge for Ross. The Fantastic Four are eventually called in, but the Hulk takes each of them out single-handedly. Then Iron Man and Thor team up to fight the Hulk. Thor combines his power to control lightning with the energy channeling ability of Iron Man's armor, but they're amazed when they're unsuccessful in neutralizing the enraged Hulk, who eventually grabs Iron Man and crushes him in his suit like an aluminum can, taking Tony out for good. Thor then fights the Hulk alone and loses Mjolnir in the process. In desperation, knowing that he'll probably perish if he reverts to Donald Blake after 60 seconds without his hammer, Thor acts decisively and snaps the Hulk's neck, ending him in the process as he reverts to a lifeless Bruce Banner. At number 9, what if Iron Man was trapped in King Arthur's time? I'm at the bottom. In this what if comic, Dr. Doom leaves Tony Stark stranded in Camelot after a betrayal. Without high-tech gear, Tony uses Iron Man's skills to join the Round Table, defending Camelot with his solar-powered suit against Morgan Le Fay and Mordred. Things get intense when King Arthur and Mordred face off in a huge battle, leading to their downfall. And after that, Arthur names Tony Sir Anthony, the Man of Iron, as his successor. If you're enjoying the video so far, please support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. At number 8, what if Conan the Barbarian were stranded in the 20th century? Conan is temporarily transported to the modern day New York, but with help he finds a way to get home, and with the police thinking him a burglar, he runs to the roof of the Guggenheim and is hit by a magical lightning bolt that sends him back to the Hyberian Age. At least that's what's supposed to happen, but in this reality, Conan misses his faithful meeting with the lightning bolt by getting to the roof sooner and allowing the cops to get a drop on him. Yeah, that's right, Conan was apprehended but a handful of cops. Super underwhelming. But it gets worse. After a stint in jail, he soon becomes a criminal, though it takes him a while to learn the language and the concepts we take for granted. Conan then decides to start his own gang and recruits the baddest bruises around. They call himself the Barbarians and they follow him gladly because he has, quote, the spirit of a black warrior. I couldn't make this stuff up if I tried. His gang goes on a rampage, and when they finally rob a museum showing a Hyberian exhibition, finally some Marvel heroes take notice. Well, singular. Captain America. This brawl ends in Civil War fashion, with Cap convincing Conan to give up and the Barbarian walking away. After that, he invites Conan to become an Avenger. Will he or won't he? The Watcher never told us. At number 7, what if Spider-Man's Uncle Ben had lived? In this alternate Marvel universe, Uncle Ben stays alive because he's not bothered by nagging back pain. In a twist of fate, when the burglar breaks into the house, Aunt May investigates instead of Ben, and sadly she meets her end. This story takes a wild turn as Uncle Ben, feeling distance from Peter, discovers his nephew's secret identity as Spider-Man. Instead of scolding Peter, Ben encourages him to be the Spidey for the right reasons and not out of guilt, but to help others. Now things heat up when Ben confronts J. Jonah Jameson about his smear campaign against Spider-Man, and an intense standoff leads to a deal where Peter will tackle crimes for the Bugle. But soon all this blows up in everybody's faces, and that's when the Green Goblin goes berserk, kidnapping Jameson. Spider-Man swoops in, sorts things out, and even helps Jonah Jameson, who turned into a hulking beast. Eventually, secrets are spilled, forgiveness flows, and Norman Osborn's Green Goblin identity is exposed way earlier than usual. This is one of those handful of what-if stories that have an overall significantly better outcome than the mainstream canon for the hero and his supporting characters because, among other things, Betty Brant doesn't lose her brother, and the early and very public unmasking of the Green Goblin gets rid of a plethora of trauma in Spider-Man's life. At number 6, what if Wolverine had eliminated the Hulk? In this alternate Marvel universe, this reality diverged during the battle between Wolverine and the Hulk. In this reality, Wolverine disobeys his order to capture him and instead takes him out. But that move set off a chain reaction of chaos that would ultimately lead to Wolverine's own demise. See, after this, Wolverine, feeling like the big shot, ends up accidentally ending an innocent person in a bar brawl. Then when his boss, James Hudson, says he has to face his consequences, Wolverine bolts. Magneto and his gang, the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, swoop in to scoop him up. Now eventually he flips sides decides and joins the X-Men to take down the Brotherhood, but in the showdown with Magneto, things turn tragic as Magneto tricks Wolverine using his metal powers to turn Wolverine's own claws against him. The result being that Wolverine meets his end by getting skewered with his own claws. At number 5, what if the Dazzler had become the Herald of Galactus? The Dazzler is a mutant with the power to turn sound into light, but what if she gained the power cosmic? In this what if tale, Galactus, the cosmic entity that devours planets, chooses Dazzler as his herald after banishing his previous one, Terrax. Initially unwilling, Dazzler agrees to spare Earth from Galactus' hunger. But then instead of leading Galactus to inhabited worlds, Dazzler guides him towards empty planets hoping to save lives. Over time, she even manages to awaken some feelings in the usually stoic Galactus. However, things take a turn when aliens seeking revenge for their planets attack Dazzler using Terrax's axe. Galactus retaliates fiercely, which angers Dazzler. After recovering, she's disappointed by Galactus' ruthless response. Returning to Earth centuries later, she finds it destroyed. With no other choice, she returns to Galactus, realizing she has nowhere else to go after so long. At number 4, what if the Fantastic Four had not gained their powers? In this world, Reed Richards decides to play it safe during their space mission, deciding instead to wait and do the rocket launch by the books with proper shielding. The result being that the trip to space is a success, and the team becomes a big shot in the space industry instead of gaining cool abilities. But surprisingly, that doesn't stop them from taking the heroic path. When Mole Man's monsters strike, the military steps in, but our fearless foursome, Reed, Sue, Johnny, and Ben, aren't deterred. They explore a tunnel beneath their place, and surprise, surprise, even without any superpowers, they outsmart the Mole Man and his creepy creatures. After this, they become old school adventurers, exploring mysteries and going on wild pulp adventures without superpowers. At number 3, what if the Beast had truly become a beast? In this alternate story, Hank's mutation formula made him more savage, turning him into a blue furry creature with a ferocious mind this time. Worried about their friend, Professor X sends Cyclops, Marvel Girl, and Angel to help, but when they find the Beast in Central Park, he attacks them, torn between his animal instincts and warning them away. Then when Professor X shows up, the Beast fights, but manages to hang on to his humanity long enough to surrender. The X-Men can't cure him, so they find him a new home in the Savage Land, where he can be free with Zakar and Zabu, unable to continue on with the X-Men due to his savage nature. At number 2, what if Galactus had turned the Silver Surfer back into Norrin Rad? So the Silver Surfer, aka Norrin Rad, was longing to return to his home planet Zen-La and reunite with his beloved Shalabal. But here's a twist: Galactus, instead of leaving Norrin stranded, turns Shalabal into his new herald called Starglow, erasing her memories of Norrin. While Norrin, aided by the Fantastic Four, seeks a way back home using the Watcher's technology, Galactus arrives at Zen-La to devour the planet, and Shalabal, now loyal to Galactus, offers herself willingly, hoping to see Nora again. When Norrin pleads for an alternative, Galactus grants him his powers back, but confines him to Zen-La as its protector. And coming in at number 1, what if Loki had found Thor's hammer first? In an alternate Marvel universe, Loki grabs hold of Thor's destiny by seizing the stick that transforms Blake into Thor, leading to a domino effect of calamities. By denying Blake access to his power, Loki triggers a series of events, from Thor's demise to Asgard teetering on the brink of destruction. As chaos unfolds, Baldur gets taken out, and Odin's quest to reclaim his son spirals into conflict. Meanwhile, Thor, guided by Baldur and Valhalla, returns to combat Hela's forces. Heimdall and the Warriors 3 hunt for Mjolnir, facing Loki and a dragon blocking their path. Now amidst Asgard's turmoil, Sif steps up, wielding Mjolnir to free Thor and aid in defeating the encroaching armies. Thor redeems himself, helping to fend off the attackers and saving Asgard. And in a moment of reflection, Odin sacrifices an eye to free Baldur, highlighting the cost of redemption and lessons learned.
Number 10, Norman Osborn with the Infinity Gauntlet. In the What If Infinity Dark Reign story, Norman Osborn, after becoming the director of Hammer and the Dark Avengers after the Civil War event, figures out how to get his hands on the Infinity Gauntlet, defeating the Illuminati and all the heroes and becoming the Goblin King. Now, using the Gauntlet, he creates a world completely under his own tyrannical rule, and he teleports his horrible and aggressive father from the past to show him all the things that he has accomplished in a really sad attempt to get his father's love and admiration, something he never really had as a child and still doesn't even have it now. His father begins to bash him for becoming a tyrannical ruler, which is a little worse given the fact that it was kind of his father's fault that Norman even turned out this way. Teleporting them both back to the Dark Avengers base, Norman finds out that the entire team has been destroyed. As Norman is trying to figure out what happened, it's revealed that Thanos has shown up to collect the gauntlet in his awesome Thanos fashion. Unfortunately, not even the Mad Titan is a match for someone wielding the gauntlet, and he is dispatched, but not before he warns Norman that he is trying to get the love of someone who he will never get it from. his father. After Thanos is gone, Norman's father, being forced by Norman and the Infinity Stones, begins to tell Norman how great he is, and Osborne just kinda loses it, wiping his father from all existence, all time, and all space. Which was dumb, because now Norman Osborn's existence is a paradox, and he, and this world that he created, fade into nothing. Number 9. All the power, no responsibility. In this What If number 19, Peter Parker makes the simple decision of stopping the robber who would go on to take Uncle Ben's life all the way back when he first encountered him and canonically did nothing. That simple change of the story robs Peter of the lesson of great power means great responsibility, and instead he turns to a life in the public eye. Now as an actor, Peter turns his focus towards making films and protecting his reputation at almost any cost. He becomes the publicist for both the Avengers and the Fantastic Four, as well as Daredevil, all while still retaining his Spider-Man persona. He even gets a cool cape for a tiny little bit. I mean, it's cool to me, I don't know. It's really not that cool. When J. Jonah Jameson exposes him to the public though, we see quite a bit more of an edge to this Spider-Man. Spider-Man threatens him and even eventually ends his career, which comes back to bite Peter when Jonah forms the Sinister Six, including himself. It's only after Daredevil jumps in to save Peter and fight the villains that Peter does actually learn the old power and responsibility thing. Number 8. What if Aunt May passed on instead of Uncle Ben? Ready to be depressed? Great, because in this What If story we are given a first-hand look at what happens to Peter if Aunt May was the one to lose her life instead of Uncle Ben. Peter, fueled by rage, goes after her killer and ends his life, but unexpectedly Uncle Ben shows up and he takes the fall for Peter, going to jail. Now, Peter is going through life with no real moral center to help guide him, and he hates the idea of being Spider-Man. He becomes a bit of a troubled kid, he goes to a juvenile prison, escapes, lives on the street, and when he is almost at his breaking point, he tries to break Uncle Ben out of prison. Now instead of going with him, Uncle Ben convinces Peter to make Aunt May proud. Peter takes it to heart, he fixes his life, he meets Mary Jane, he focuses on school, being a hero when the world really needs him, and eventually Ben gets out of prison on good behavior, and that's when we finally get the power and responsibility speech, which leads to Peter becoming Spider-Man more permanently, and with Uncle Ben as like a Spider-Man version of Bruce Wayne's Alfred. He goes on to become the hero that New York deserves. Nice.
He originates from Earth 20,329, or Steampunk Godworld. Love that name, we should make it into a theme park. Steampunk Godworld comes from Extreme X-Men Volume 2 and also the year 2012. This is the sort of world that could only come from the year of 2012. The world is ruled by mutant gods and Charles Xavier is evil, and also his head is in a floating fishbowl. It's amazing. Magneto here goes by Magnus and he has a mohawk. Kind of. It looks more like a Roman battle helmet. He looks great no matter what is on his head. He also wears a trench coat. Truly, this has gotta be like peak Magneto fashion here. Magnus seems to have the same powers as his 616 counterpart, but better style. I'm kidding, they're both beautiful in their own way. I'm not trying to start fights today. Him and Xavier created a world together that was a secret haven for science and tech and mutants, and all was well until it was discovered that Xavier was evil. Magneto had to end him for that one. Magsquito, the magnetic mosquito, is an actual character, if you can believe it. He originated in Peter Porker, the Spectacular Spider-Ham, and that makes this make more sense, I think. Magsquito is the main enemy to the X-Bugs. You can probably guess who the X-Bugs are in the 616 universe. The X-Bugs find out about Magsquito throwing a bunch of metal around because though he is a mosquito, he still has powerful magnetism abilities. The X-Bugs assume the worst and they go to stop Magsquito. The thing is, Magsquito wasn't actually doing anything wrong here. He actually decided to leave evil in the past and open a junkyard to sell scrap metal. So all that metal throwing was just him at work contributing to society. The X-Bugs literally show up and ruin his day, but at least they look remorseful when they discover that he wasn't doing anything wrong and he was just vibing at work. Magsquito does eventually return to evil though when he is recruited to join a villain squad. He ends up arrested by Sheep for that one. Sheep is S.H.I.E.L.D. in this universe, by the way. The Bee yonder ended up transporting a bunch of heroes and villains off Earth to make them do animal secret wars known as Secret Furs. That's kind of the last time we see him. At first his outfit was more magnet themed. He wore red and blue and had a magnet on his head, but the last time we see him he is wearing the red and purple we've come to associate associate with Magneto. Magneto and Rogue as a romance is something we've all seen, some of us wish we hadn't, but it did happen. That's not the only time the two have been close. They were once absorbed into one person. In X-Men Millennial Visions 2 or on Earth 1033, Magneto was born. So Magneto finds out he has a few months left to live and he throws a temper tantrum all over New York. He starts a war downtown. That's not really what happened. In reality, he realized that he only had a few months left to secure the place of mutants in society and was willing to get there before his death by any means necessary. In an effort to stop the event, Rogue and the X-Men tried to absorb Magneto's powers into her life force so she could attempt to use his powers to stop the fight. She did not account for the sheer amount of traumatic memories he holds in his head, and it was so much she literally got overwhelmed and shut down. Magneto had an opening to take over her body, he took it. So now Magneto is chillin' in the body of a former lover and is back terrorizing the Earth, but as a woman. As a woman who is a member of the X-Men. That causes pretty much all the problems one might expect. Magneto broke into the High Evolutionaries base in the Savage Land to attempt to find a disease or a virus that would be strong enough to wipe out humans and leave mutants in charge of the world. He did find the disease and it did eliminate a bunch of people, unfortunately. However, it didn't work out completely in his favor as mutants were soon locked up so humans could find a cure. Magneto was still running loose in the Savage Land, so the X-Men that weren't captured went to fight her. We don't know how it ended. The Millennial Visions were just imagined futures, stories that would likely never make it to the page, but were fun for writers to explore. So there are lots of examples of interesting versions of the heroes in there. I like to think though that Magneto lost that final battle. The X-Sentinel Magneto is real and he will hurt you. I mean, I'm assuming most of us are human, so he'd probably want to hurt us anyway, but the Sentinel version of him is that times 10. This version is also from the X-Men Millennial Visions, but volume 1 this time. Earth 1011 is a world in which first the X-Men seem to get along with Magneto, which is great. He is part of the team. The X-Men, though they are mutants, they can still get hurt most of the time. Injuries can be bounced back from, but as the X-Men get older, it's hard to heal and some injuries were too great. So to keep their bodies battle ready, if some part of them went down, it would be replaced with a cybernetic version. Eventually, their entire body was cybernetic and even their minds. The X-Men downloaded their consciousness into their bodies. This comic came out in 2000 and just 10 years later, humanity caught up. They actually did that with a real person, B-I-N-A if you are interested, but back to the mutants though. Their cybernetic bodies were designed to look like the suit of the mutants so that people would recognize them, knew they were on their side. The problem with these cybernetic brains is that they started to overflow with information and break down, leading to the team taking a page out of Magneto's book and existing with their one purpose they were built for, protecting mutant kind by any means necessary. And that meant terrorizing humans and hunting them down just to keep mutants safe. With all the demonic things Magneto has done in his life, it's only fair that he once had what looks like little devil horns on his helmet. Earth 928 exists in X-Men 2099 and it's responsible for maybe Devil Magneto? This Magneto is mentioned in a speech. The speech is about the rights of mutants and the rules of combat that go with it. This Magneto is assumed to have all the same powers of 616 Magneto plus what looks like 2 little horns. Magneto's helmet has taken on a lot of different shapes. Earth's 1191's Magneto helmet kind of looks like a scorpion? This world is thought to be more made up. It exists in the X-Men, The Times and Life of Lucas Bishop 3. Bishop is being told a story by his grandmother, so all the characters are drawn in the way a young Bishop might have imagined them. Toad is actually a toad, for example, and Magneto just looks weird. He still leads the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. In this imaginary Kid Bishop world, they were plotting to eliminate a mutant-fearing politician that wanted to, and did, pass anti-mutant laws. Him and the Brotherhood were of course stopped by the X-Men. It was a good thing because then humans started seeing that mutants weren't all evil. The main difference between this universe and 616 is that everyone looks different because they're being imagined by a child. Lots of the events and everything remain the same as they are simply stories being passed through the generations. The Magneto of Earth 1191 seems to have the same backstory and powers as the Magneto of 616. It is time to start monkeying around because Ape Magneto is on the scene. It's Earth 8101 and most of the heroes and villains here are apes. Magneto has the same costume as 616 Magneto, and it looks like the same powers. The biggest, possibly only difference between the two is that one is a few steps behind in its evolution. Magneto really isn't in the comics a lot, but he is there just enough that you clock his presence. He was featured in a big battle where the Ape Avengers, Ape X-Men, and Ape Fantastic Four were all trying to defeat the Ape Beyonder. It appears that Magneto and Magneto 616 share similar, if not the exact same power set. With all the antics Magneto gets up to, it's only a matter of time before he became a court jester. Magneto has done a lot of bad things, yet I almost feel bad for him in this situation. The Earth is 9997 from the Earth X comic. This Magneto shares a very similar past with 616 Magneto, but this Magneto has a very different future. The part of note that caught my eye, and is the reason that this Magneto made it on the list, is because Magneto became a jester. It happened during the Universe X moment. Galactus destroyed the celestial embryo that was growing inside the Earth. That, of course, messed the Earth up. Vibranium was shifting around and it made the Earth's poles shift. Somehow, because of the poles shifting, Magneto and Toad switch powers, so now Toad is one of the most powerful mutants ever, and Magneto is left to suffer to his every whim. Toad made Magneto his jester and treated him the way Magneto treated Toad, so Toad is coming from somewhere with his actions. Magneto's powers were eventually restored and he shockingly forgave Toad. This Magneto is stronger than 616's Magneto simply because he's older and has had more time to get stronger. Magneto was once Enrique. This was the Marvel 1602 story where time travel gone wrong caused our X-Men to exist in the 17th century instead of the 21st century. So everyone has new names, not just Magneto. How we get Enrique from Magneto, or even Max, unclear, but this is taking place during the Spanish Inquisition, so that probably has something to do with it. Magneto 616 is Jewish, but this Magneto was taken as a kid and baptized against his will into the Catholic Church and then kept there and raised there. In this world, mutants are called witch breeds, and so the usual elimination methods used during the Spanish Inquisition are used on the witch breeds. Every major thing that happens in the original plot happens here, just with a historical twist. 17th century Magneto became the Grand Inquisitor at his church, and he was responsible for targeting witch breeds, but if a witch breed blended in, he would kind of just turn the other cheek, like with his kids in this universe. Of course, Enrique does get found out for his witch breed status and then escapes to America. Enrique has all the same powers of 616 Magneto, but he also has a leg up on him. He has a sick beard. Marvel 1602 or Earth 311 is truly the gift that keeps on giving. I don't know what it is about modern heroes and old-timey outfits, but I love it and I want more. The Magneto of 8311 goes by Magneto and is also a horse. It's the Spider-Ham comics. It would be weirder if something normal happened. Magneto appears in the backup comic Iron Mouse in Peter Porker, The Spectacular Spider-Ham 3. Magneto was a half-hour late returning his tape to the video store. The comic was released in the 80s, so those still existed. But because he was late, he was charged a late fee of $5, which he was not happy about at all. In all fairness, that would be a $14.50 charge today. As revenge, Magneto uses his animal magnetism powers to erase the tapes in the store, effectively destroying the shop owner's business. Magneto almost got the Lawrence Elk tapes though, and that did not sit well with an old lady nearby, so she smacked him into a concussion with her umbrella. Magneto disappeared for over 3 decades, then reappeared in 2020 in Spider-Ham 3 in the background of one of the big battles. Just when you thought you've seen it all, Marvel throws Monkey Scott Summers into the mix. Sherlock Holmes better watch out because Detective Cyclops is coming for his gig. X-Men Ghost Boxes gave us the gift of Detective Cyclops in 2008. Hailing from Earth 889, this Cyclops is part of a pre-digital culture. He is still protecting the Earth from other dimension threats. This time, the threat is extra-dimensional mutants that have targeted Earth for annexation. Cyclops is part of the X Society, and they are basically the X-Men. They are the protectors of the Earth. Overall, the world looks super cool and vintage, and I absolutely would choose to live there. The art style is really cool, the story seems interesting, plus the characters are all detectives. Like, what more could you want? What the X Society is investigating here is the intentional passing of a mutant from possibly another universe. Scott is a pretty major player in the short series. At the start of the second comic, he goes on a big, introspective, slightly emotional, depressing, reflective monologue called The Last Testament of Scott Summers. Is Cyclops really still a Cyclops? Cyclops if you replace every piece of him? Remember that thought experiment they brought up in WandaVision, Theseus's paradox? Well, that was Cyclops the X-Sentinel. Earth 1011 exists in the X-Men Millennial Visions. What business do I have bringing up the Theseus thing though? In the comic, it's like a page-long explanation of what's happening and then a big picture of what they just explained. There is a photo of the main X-Men. The attached essay to that picture claims that as the X-Men got older, it was harder for them to heal from battle wounds, but they still wanted to fight and protect the Earth. So they started replacing the parts of themselves too hurt to carry on. Like the blur breeds, a lower leg, or arm is too damaged, no big deal, we'll just replace it. They even downloaded their consciousness into the cybernetic bodies so they could fight forever.
Number 8. What if Sergeant Fury had fought World War II in outer space? This story offers a glimpse into an alternate reality where World War II was fought in space? This story takes place in an alternate reality where instead of being divided by eastern and western fronts, the battle is divided between beta and alpha sectors. As such, we get to see Sergeant Nick Fury fighting alongside the Howling Commandos in outer space, smoking a cigar even while wearing a space helmet. Seems like a bad idea, but it's Nick Fury, so that's what he's gonna do. It's also explained that we have Da Vinci's inventions to thank for this early technological advancement, which led to us getting to outer space in the 1940s, which is maybe the best bit of exposition explanation in the book, and just in general that I've read. It's pretty ridiculous. Oh, and of course we also get to watch our heroes fight aliens, because space. Number 7. What if the world knew Daredevil was blind? Yeah, this is a weird story, especially because it kind of implies that if Daredevil wasn't blind and didn't have superpowers, his life would actually be better or easier. As though, like, you know, if you're blind, your life is going to be terrible, but if you're not blind, your life is great, which I don't think is true. That's not how that works. I mean, he's also still got an enemy in Wilson Fisk, I'd assume, so I just feel like this is a big oversimplification. In this story, the world finds out that Daredevil is blind, and as a result, those close to him begin to piece together that Daredevil is in fact Matt Murdock, because you know, Matt Murdock is blind. Get it? He then ends up having his sight restored via an operation, unmasks, and lives happily ever after with Karen, trading his heroic initials of DD for DA and becoming the new district attorney of New York. He's swapping it out. I also love how Karen's like, oh, thank goodness you're not a superhero, now we can get married. Number 6. What if Black Bolt talked in his sleep? This is a very short story, and I think you can imagine how it ends if you are familiar with the Inhuman King known as Black Bolt, but it's also just very humorously written. You can find this single-page story near the back of issue 9 of What If Volume Number 2. Apparently when Black Bolt eats pineapple pizza before bed, it has disastrous consequences. Also, good to know what kind of pizza Black Bolt likes. I personally also love pineapple on my pizza, but I feel like that just lets you know if someone's cool or not. Oh, the strange things that you learn about people and pizza. If Black Bolt talked in his sleep all the time, the Inhumans would have a lot of rebuilding to do all the time. I also just like how resigned some of these Inhumans are in that last panel. Like, oh, he did it again, I guess I'm just gonna sleep on some rubble for the rest of the night. That's just how it is, shucks. And only Medusa is the one that's mad. She's like, baby, I told you not to eat that pizza. This always happens. Number 5. What if Wolverine had a styrofoam skeleton? Issue 100 is just one of the best for some real weird stories. One of the stories it offers us is only told through a mock-up cover, but it's so good it's just gotta be mentioned because the cover is just too good. It also is presented beside another great mock-up cover offering an alternate story where Peter Parker became Sheep Boy instead of Spider-Man. Sheep Boy, I love it. In the Wolverine mock-up, we're offered an alternate Logan who goes by the codename Wolverwimp. He is cowering on the front cover, about to have his styrofoam skeleton ripped out by Magneto, a mean little girl. I also just love the reference to Wolverine also losing his nose when he lost his adamantium that's on there. Mock-up what if stories are actually the best. I wish we got a full story of this. Someone write that, please. Number 4. What if Iron Man was trapped in the time of King Arthur? The craziest thing about this what if is that it's actually kind of an alternate retelling of a real-life main continuity story where Iron Man was transported to Camelot in medieval times with Dr. Doom and managed to escape. Although this story offers the alternative of, you know, what if he wasn't able to escape and only Dr. Doom got out? You can find it in What If Volume 1, Issue 33. The answer to the question is that Iron Man would be drained of energy, get frustrated in realizing that, he couldn't rebuild a time machine, and ends up becoming Sir Anthony of Iron, an Iron Knight at King Arthur's Round Table. In fact, he uses his suit to help protect the realm from the evil Morgana, defeating her, but in the ensuing battle is unable to prevent King Arthur from becoming mortally wounded. With his dying breath, Arthur makes Sir Anthony his successor, even though they kinda just met, but it's fine I guess. Which means that the Anthony of Iron Man's past, his past self from the future, would probably be really weirded out if he ever read any stories of Camelot. He'd be like, Sir Anthony of Iron became the king. Wait, I'm Iron Man. What? Maybe that was actually his inspiration in the alternate reality to create the Iron Man suit. And now Tony's just stuck in like a time loop. Number 3. What if Wolverine was the Lord of Vampires? In this story, Wolverine becomes the new Lord of Vampires, which is kinda weird considering what we know of Wolverine's healing factor now, but this is also obviously an alternate reality and a story that was written in the 90s, so there's that. Here Wolverine is transformed into a vampire by Dracula. It also features a sweet vampire hunter version of Punisher, who is sporting Doctor Strange's cape, and I personally think that the Punisher looks amazing in that cape. So lavish, I just want him to wear capes all the time now. In the end, Punisher is defeated, but Wolverine has a crisis of conscience and ends up flipping to the side of good once more, killing himself and all the other vampire supes and villains he'd made at the same time. And for some reason, Doc Ock's body and tentacles turn to dust. Now, shouldn't his tentacles be okay though? Because they're not made of his tissue. Also, I love when people are like, "You're dust," and all their clothes become dust. I'm like, shouldn't their clothes be fine? Anyways, it's a small technical thing, but it bothers me. Number 2. What if paper skin? Remember when we were talking about issue 100 of volume 2 of What If? Well, an actual story that is featured in there is called Paper Skin. It is honestly such a strange story. I need to share it with you. This is a what if story that seems to posit the question of what if Mr. Sinister could offer Gambit a cure for Rogue's powers. It's revealed in the story that Gambit has already betrayed the X-Men by bargaining with Sinister, offering important Cerebro files in exchange for what he wants. Although what Gambit wants is not actually for him, but is kind of for all mutant kind, a cure to the legacy virus. As he's about to leave after getting that cure, Sinister offers him something else that he simply can't resist. A cure for Rogue, his one true love, to help her control her powers. He agrees to steal one more thing for Sinister in exchange for the cure, a tithe box. Sinister has been searching for them and collecting them over the years. In the end, Rogue accepts the cure, but can't accept that Gambit has been helping Sinister, and so she kills him, taking his powers and also his look seemingly, which is kinda weird. It's like Gambit with and I'm like, I don't know how I feel about this art, but okay. She goes after Sinister only to find the secret of what the boxes contained was Marvel Comics! Gasp. Now Sinister has so much information because he's been reading Marvel Comics. What a weird reality. What a meta reality. Number 1. What if Avengers vs. X-Men? In this bizarro story, Magneto helps to ensure that Hope ends up getting the Phoenix Force instead of it being split up into Iron Man by 5 parts, which possesses and creates the Phoenix 5. Magneto is seemingly helping Hope to control these new and awesome powers, but when she struggles and begins to turn dark, he suggests she give him some power to help her. In reality, Magneto kinda wants all the power for himself, which is just what he takes. This all happens in the last issue, by the way, of this 4-part what if story. And after Magneto takes the power, it gets pretty weird. Yeah, that's not where it ends. It just keeps going forever. He takes the power and is instantly corrupted by it. As such, Xavier somehow uses his powers to temporarily mess with Magneto's sight, despite the fact that Magneto is wearing his helmet, and then Wolverine snicks him through the eyes. This results in Magneto basically exploding, killing everyone on the planet, and destroying the Earth. Then Jean shows up randomly and just kinda reveals she saw all of this coming. She uses her Phoenix powers to fix the planet, bringing back plant and animal life, but not people for some reason. She says it's up to her and Wolverine as basically an Eve and an Adam of sorts to do that. She could've just brought all those people back, I'm pretty sure, because she's got the power of the Phoenix, but yeah, it's a weird one. It's a weird one. Number 10. What if Doctor Doom became the Thing? In this one shot, we get to see an alternate reality where instead of Ben Grimm being present when the FF first transformed, Victor Von Doom was in his place instead. He found himself, while in his armor, transformed into the Thing, while the rest of the team was granted the same powers as normal. Ben Grimm ends up actually getting caught in a radioactive explosion when a reactor blows, which transforms him then into the Hulk, and he and Doom/the Thing battle it out. In the end, Hulk Grimm is about to smash Thing Doom, but is talked down by the rest of the FF. They're like, put that rock down. Calm down. It's all good, Ben. He ends up joining them while Doom still becomes the team's villain, bearing very different scars because, you know, under his mask, he's the Thing! Number 9. What if Spider-Man's parents destroyed his family? This story takes an already ridiculous one and offers us another take on it. Although to be fair, I actually like this version of the story better, to be honest. Remember when Chameleon made those robots to act as Peter's parents just to, I don't know, reveal them as fakes and torment him? Well, in this story, his fake robo-parents are even worse. They end up murdering Aunt May and Mary Jane and make sure that Spider-Man is framed for the murders. In retaliation, while on the run from the law, Spider-Man, pushed to his breaking point, kills Chameleon and his robo-parents, getting back at them for good before turning himself into the authorities. It's a much darker take on this story. So dark. Before we move on to this next spot, just a reminder to click that like if you haven't already if you're enjoying this video. It really helps us out a ton. Number 8. What if Aunt May died instead of Uncle Ben? This one actually changed things up quite a bit, turning Peter Parker from the life of being a hero to more of a delinquent just scraping by. Everything in Peter's origins goes the same except Uncle Ben being shot. Aunt May is shot during a burglary at her home instead while she is there alone. Uncle Ben was out picking up a gallon of milk and both he and Peter arrive home to find the police and Aunt May's corpse. It's then that Peter decides to very dramatically reveal he is Spider-Man. This part's just really ridiculous, but I love it. He goes after the burglar, ready to kill the man for taking his aunt's life. In the end, the thief falls out of a window just as Uncle Ben arrives on the scene. Rather than let Peter take the rap when the police show up or confess what truly happened, because he could just be like, that person just fell out a window, Uncle Ben confesses to killing the man for murdering his wife. Even though he didn't. Ben goes to jail and without anyone to guide him, Peter gives up being Spider-Man. He does however don the costume once more to put JJ in his place for coming after him after the death of his son John Jameson, who in this reality wasn't rescued by Spider-Man, because Spider-Man wasn't Spider-Man at the time. He also calls JJ some pretty harsh names considering the guy recently lost his son. Jeez, Spidey! Basically, if Peter Parker doesn't have Aunt May to guide him, he's kind of a jerk and is kind of terrible. So that's what I learned about that. Uncle Ben is not as good as Aunt May apparently. Number 7. What if Green Goblin stole the Infinity Gauntlet? I personally love how this story just jumps right into it. The introduction reminds us of both the Dark Reign and Infinity events, and then they just jump right into Norman Osborn murdering his originally own Dark Avenger Sentry with the Infinity Gauntlet. Wow. Also, how is Norman even able to wield such a powerful weapon? Because he's just like a normal human, right? Or I don't know, maybe his craziness from his Green Goblin stuff makes him possible to hold it? I don't know. I guess he just is, because what ifs. In this alternate universe, it's revealed that Norman Osborn takes the gauntlet and uses it to reshape the world and, by assumption, also the entire galaxy in his image, all to get back at his dad for mistreating him years earlier. In the end, Thanos shows up to claim what is his, but with the power of the gauntlet, Norman makes short work of him. Thanos also weirdly comes in telling Norman that no amount of power will ever get him the love he seeks. Kind of a weird line for Thanos there. After the battle is won, Norman responds while standing over Thanos' charred remains, "My only wish is for power, love is for fools." He then ends up killing his father from the past in a rage, and as such perishes himself because of a time paradox. Because if you kill your dad from the past, you can't exist. Although I think at that point in his life, his dad may have had him as a child, so I don't know. But that's the end. Poof, it's gone. Number 6. What if Conan the Barbarian walked the earth today? Half of this what if story is just meant to re-establish Conan and explain how he gets to modern day New York. But when he does arrive, it is a pretty crazy and strange time. This apparently, according to the cover anyways, was the most requested and highly anticipated what if of the day when the first volume of What Ifs was happening in the 70s. Conan, upon arriving in the modern day, has a lot of weird and, in his opinion, I'm sure disturbing experiences. One sees him harassed by an elderly woman who hits him with her bag because she believes he is too scantily clad. She's like, "Cover up your bottom, sir. Cover that up." Conan doesn't like this very much and so he dumps her in a trash can. Literally, she's just stuck in it and I'm just like, wow Conan, that's pretty intense. She's just an old lady. He then runs into a cab driver, striking her vehicle with a sword, believing it's a monster. She ends up taking pity on him though, saying she senses he is mostly harmless, despite the fact that he is super muscly, looks pretty angry most of the time, and just struck her cab with the freaking sword. In the end, Conan disappears from New York and is transported away when he is struck by a bolt of lightning, which does not seem to really surprise the police officers who witnessed that. I guess in modern day New York, where superheroes exist, life is so fantastical that nothing really phases you. Also, maybe that's just the 70s, like maybe in the 70s people got struck by bolts of lightning and disappeared and people were like, that's totally a normal 70s thing to happen. I don't know, I wasn't alive in the 70s, so I don't know if that's true or not. Number 5, what if Vision of the Avengers conquered the world? Time to answer that burning question you always wanted answered. What if Vision of the Avengers had conquered the world? No? Did no one need this question answered? Well, too bad, because you're getting an answer. Vision is a supremely intelligent android, so if you're thinking this will probably end well for Earth, you're not completely wrong. Vision ruling does bring about peace and an end to poverty and hunger initially, but he also places Earth and its heroes in an intergalactic war where they are forced to take on the Skrull and the Kree. And in the end, he's also responsible for the decline of civilization somewhat when humans rebel against his rule and take out New York City in an attempt to harm Vision, as his mainframe is stored there. When this fails and also eliminates millions of innocent lives as well as most of the superhero community, the humans turn on technology and evolve into further anarchy and chaos. Yikes. So basically, we shouldn't let Vision rule the Earth. That's the moral of the story. It's not gonna end well, probably. Number 4, what if Prince Namor of Atlantis grew up on land? I feel like a lot of the other heroes and teams that were highlighted in this early 2000s batch of what ifs got much more interesting concepts thrown their way. The answer to this what if is likely just what you imagine. Namor is kinda just less impressive. It starts off after Namor gets teased for being unable to swim. A Namor that can't swim. Yeah. Although I do feel bad for him getting teased, but still, I was like, wow, this is the reality we're in. He still ends up fighting alongside the allies and heroes of World War II, but without the power of Atlantis at his back, as he turns away from his heritage, instead choosing to ally himself with the land dwellers, instead of oppose them. In the end, however, when he's ordered to blow up his people because of their proximity to the enemy, he refuses, and does end up returning to Atlantis, but too late, as his people still end up getting blown up in the crossfire. Like most what ifs, Namor is left returning to the man we know him to be, the avenging son of his people and of the sea. It's like swimming, and he's like, I can swim now, and also I'm gonna avenge these people that died. Not Atlantis, no. Number 3, what if Captain America were revived today? This story is both weird and amazing. Also, I believe there are 2 versions of it, so to clarify, the one we're talking about here is from the 77 What If series, issue number 44. This story imagines what if we got the fake Cap before we got the real Cap. If you don't know that story, it comes from a retcon where Marvel chose to explain away the fact that Cap was supposedly around during the time we later said he was frozen. The retcon goes that the Cap and Bucky we saw after the original pair's disappearance at the end of World War II were actually fakes, who were driven mad from exposure to the super soldier serum, which obviously didn't work as well as it had with the original Cap. The fake Cap being revived first revealed just how intense he was when he started going after people he deemed communists and insisting that certain Americans, such as the youth and minorities, were far too divided and should be more patriotic. Fortunately, we come to the present day where the real Captain America is revived, he takes on the imposter, and we get a pretty sweet cap-on-cap fight where the real Captain America actually tells the imposter that the USA only needs him as a reminder of basically how not to be. He goes on to speak to the people after defeating the crazed imposter that he told you that Americans were the greatest people, that America could be refined like silver, could have the impurities hammered out of it and shine more brightly. He went on about how precious America was, how you needed to make sure it remained great, and he told you anything was justified to preserve that great treasure, that pearl of great price that is America. While I say America is nothing without its ideals, its commitment to the freedom of all men, America is a piece of trash. He goes on to remind people it's not the flag they should fight for, but the freedom that makes this nation and its people great, and reminds people that they need to work to protect those freedoms for all Americans, not sacrifice them for the promise of greatness. It's also just like, it's a weird issue and it's a great issue. That speech at the end is like, it's beautiful. You should all read it. It's pretty great. Number 2. What if Betty Brant was bitten by the radioactive spider instead? This is the second tale in the what if someone else besides Spider-Man had been bitten by the radioactive spider issue. You might know about Flash and John Jameson, but do you remember Betty's story from this one, wedged in between the stories belonging to those two gents? It is actually super ridiculous. Betty faints when she is bitten because she actually can't stand spiders and they make her queasy. Her powers surface while she's off to coffee with Peter and smashes the table in a rage while talking about her infuriating boss, JJ. It also features one of the most ridiculous Spider-Woman costumes I have ever seen. It's so ridiculous, oh my goodness. Number 1. What if the original Marvel bullpen had become the Fantastic Four? Yep, this what if story is pretty crazy, and it imagines what the Fantastic Four might be like if some of the original Marvel staff were transformed by cosmic radio waves into the FF themselves. It features Stan Lee as Mr. Fantastic, Sol Brodsky as the Human Torch, appropriate considering his first name, Jack Kirby with almost pinkish or purple hued hair in this issue as the Thing, and finally fabulous Flo Steinberg as the Invisible Woman. It all happens after the team receives a gift from a mysteriously glossy-eyed fan. It turns out the gift is some kind of contraption that the team thinks is a radio, but then it seems to blast them with a bunch of superpower granting cosmic rays, or their radio equivalent. The story sees the Marvel staff FF crossing paths with Namor and even taking on Skrulls. Number 10. What if the leader decided to buy a hat? This is a short one, but a great one. It comes to us from one of the comedic issues of What If in the '89 series. It's just a panel featuring a what if story where the leader buys a hat. Of course, because it is a comedy issue, the leader buys the most ridiculous hat there is. Technically, 2 hats. Propeller hats. I just love his super serious face. This one literally made me laugh out loud. Number 9. What if the Hulk landed on the peaceful planet that Reed Richards promised? This one is both weird, but is also kinda great. It does a really good job of highlighting the division between Bruce Banner and the Hulk and the difference between these two entities. We're also offered a glimpse into how these two manage to work together though, and at times teach each other and help one another. Instead of landing on Sakaar, Hulk lands on the peaceful planet that Richards had intended for him. The nature on this planet calms Hulk and soothes his soul. He and Banner, however, still have their issues and end up dividing the planet in half. Banner hunts and builds tech in an attempt to escape, but the Hulk finds happiness here and becomes worshipped as a god by a race of sorta cat-like creatures who eventually evolve to become cat people. When Banner learns of this, it's implied that he comes to terms almost with his imprisonment when at the end of the issue we see a version of the Hulk who resembles, or seems to resemble, Bruce a little more than he usually would. Hulk continues to protect the cat people from, well, giant alien snakes? I don't think they were always alien snakes, but that's definitely what they evolved into. Number 8. What if the X-Men had stayed in Asgard? This is an interesting story. Here we see the X-Men split as they decide whether or not to stay in Asgard. Those that would leave are permitted to do so, but those who would stay, like Storm, Magic, Wolfsbane, Karma, Cannonball, Rogue, Nightcrawler, and Cypher, are permitted to do so, to the point that there is actually no New Mutants team in Midgard any longer. Instead, we would have had a new X-Men team and basically no New Mutants, with those who stayed in Asgard finding a different kind of happiness there until they're forced to acknowledge that all of this was somewhat of a sham. These mutants are basically like, well, we could go back, but it's really terrible on Earth because people are really prejudiced towards us, and so we're just gonna chill here. This seems nicer in Asgard. Storm ends up fighting a frog version of Thor, and Magic is forced to take on Enchantress as each battles for power. In the end, Loki is defeated, as is Hela, and everyone who remains alive, which is pretty much all the mutants that chose to stay, live happily ever after in Asgard. What a nice ending. Number 7. What if Peter Parker had become Nova? In issue 15 of the 1977 What If series, it gives us a glimpse into 4 other options for Nova's true identity. One such option posed in these alternate storylines is Peter Parker. Here we see Peter become one of the most depressing characters when he is bitten by a radioactive spider that has absorbed a higher dose of radiation than the one on our world, or the Earth of 616. I mean, 616 isn't really our world. I don't know. Do you guys think we live on 616? I think we actually have a categorization for this world. Meaning that instead of giving Peter powers, he loses the ability to control his legs, becoming paralyzed from the waist down. The shock of this accident accident also kills Aunt May, and Peter basically becomes the biggest sourpuss, blaming himself for everything, including the death of his aunt, and pushing everyone away from him. He refuses even to enjoy Festival Eve. Come on, Peter, everyone enjoys Festival Eve. What is Festival Eve, though? In the end, an Emerald Ray grants him the powers of Nova, healing him. Amazed, he immediately heads to his uncle for advice and interrupts a burglar breaking into his Uncle Ben's home. He kills the burglar accidentally while attempting to protect his uncle, and only becomes more depressed at the fact that he killed someone, refusing to be Nova, and once again blaming himself for pretty much every tragedy he has suffered or encountered in his life. This is very harsh, Peter. Like, I know Peter is normally a character who beats himself up a lot, but this is a lot even for Peter Parker.
At number 10 is X-24. In the dark and twisted multiverse of comic book adaptations, we've seen our fair share of alternate versions of our beloved characters, but in the film Logan, this sinister creation was engineered to be the ultimate unaliving machine, a nightmarish mirror image of Wolverine himself. Unlike the brooding and complex Logan we know, X-24 is a ruthless berserker devoid of any moral compass. See, he wasn't played by inner demons or a sense of duty, he was a pure force of destruction. And what made him even more terrifying was his relentless pursuit of Laura, or X-23, who shared Wolverine's blood. Every time X-24 appeared on screen, a wave of anxiety washed over myself, knowing that this unrelenting monster would stop at nothing to achieve its grisly objectives. If you're enjoying this video so far, you can support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. I would really appreciate it. At number 9 is Zombieverse Wolverine. In the eerie expanse of the multiverse, we stumble upon a spine-chilling variant of Wolverine, who's a zombie. Venture into Earth Z, or Earth 2149, a nightmarish realm in which this gruesome iteration, Wolverine's fate, takes a sinister twist as he, along with a select other few heroes, feast upon the remains of the cosmic entity Galactus. But it doesn't stop there. The unholy banquet bestows upon zombie Wolverine the dreaded power cosmic. Damn, picture it. The relentless savagery of Wolverine as a zombie, fueled with the limitless might of the cosmos. It's a ghastly unison that transforms Logan into a nightmarish force, a walking apocalypse with claws and a cosmic energy at his disposal. This incarnation of Wolverine sends shivers down the spine, reminding us that within the multiverse, terror knows no bounds. At number 8 is the Lord of the Vampires. This spine-chilling incarnation of Logan emerged from the pages of the What If series, specifically in Volume 2, Issue 24. Here, a fateful turn of events sees Storm choosing to stay by Dracula's side during the X-Men's clash with the infamous Vampire Lord. The consequences were world-altering, as Wolverine and his fellow heroes fell victim to capture and transformation. Yet the adamantium-laced warrior's indomitable will proved way too powerful for Dracula's control. In a gruesome twist, Wolverine overcame the Vampire Lord, seizing the throne and becoming the new Lord of the Vampires. Picture Wolverine with fangs, ruling over legions of bloodsuckers, and capable of enslaving anyone with a single bite. It's a nightmarish blend of clawed ferocity and a moral bloodlust that would haunt even the most fearless of souls. At number 7 is Cancerverse Wolverine. Cancerverse Wolverine is a denizen of Earth 10011, remains a shadowy figure in the Marvel Universe. In this eerie reality known as the Cancerverse, the Grim Reaper has been utterly obliterated, and in the absence of the unalive, paradoxically, it gave birth to a cosmic nightmare. Cancerverse Wolverine's appearance alone is enough to send shivers down your spine. In a world where mortality is non-existent, life spirals into a grotesque spectacle, a chilling reflection of the importance of balance in the universe. Because in this twisted realm, even a hero like Wolverine becomes a harbinger of terror, a reminder that the natural order of things, no matter how unsettling, always has its rightful place. At number 6 is Old Man Logan. Old Man Logan is a haunting iteration of Wolverine, emerging from Earth 807128. In this chilling reality, the claws of tragedy run deep. See, Logan was once a hero who now carries the crushing weight of guilt upon his adamantium-laced shoulders. Mysterio's sinister dissipation led him down a path of unwitting euthanization, annihilating his fellow X-Men. Time catapults us into a future where Logan has abandoned his iconic alias, opting simply for his first name to escape the specter of his past. But destiny refuses to release his grip. Logan attempts to evade heroics, settling into a family life, yet peril relentlessly pursues him. When the ruthless Hulk gang eliminates terminates his loved ones over the late protection money, Logan's dormant savagery ignites. The descent into vengeance becomes an inescapable plunge, culminating in a gory reckoning that liberates his world from the clutches of the deranged Pappy Banner and his nightmarish clan. In the desolate landscape of Old Man Logan's reality, even heroes succumb to darkness, making it one of the most spine-tingling alternate Wolverines in the multiverse. And at number 5, my personal favorite is Old Man Venom. Enter the Venomverse, where unimaginable transformations await. In this universe, we get to see Old Man Logan devoured by a venom-infested T-Rex. But here's the twist. The symbiote decides that Logan is a superior host and merges with him. The result is Venom Wolverine, or as I like to call him, Old Man Venom, a character oozing with insanity, ethics thrown out the window, and an utter disregard for consequences. Sure, he might have a laundry list of symbiote vulnerabilities, making him marginally less formidable than your typical regenerating Logan, but the sheer terror he instills is undeniable. Venom Wolverine is a monstrous fusion of two iconic characters, delving into a spine-tingling combination of ferocity and chaos. Next time you delve into alternate realities, keep an eye out for this hair-raising incarnation of Wolverine. At number 4 is Wolverine Noir. In the shadowy realms of this alternate universe, we stumble upon Jim Logan, a character shrouded in mystery and intrigue. This noir iteration of Wolverine takes us on a journey through the Marvel Noirverse, offering a distinctive twist on the iconic mutant. In this iteration, Logan isn't a berserker on the battlefield, but a detective navigating the murky waters of crime. It's a fitting role for a man with heightened senses and a knack for tracking. Wolverine Noir paints a gritty picture of reminiscent of classic noir films, amplifying the eerie ambience that defines this universe. This version delves into Wolverine's past, mirroring the harrowing narrative from his origin series. Raised by a fervently religious father, Jim's childhood is the haunting tale of sermons and strife, shaping his path into the detective he becomes. So while we've seen Logan in countless forms, Jim Logan's chilling incarnation stands out as one of the most intriguing and unsettling alternate versions of this iconic character. At number 3 is Phoenix Wolverine. In the realm of eerie alternate Wolverines, the incarnation known as Phoenix Logan takes a chilling spot on our list. Picture a grim future where Thor ascends to the All-Father status and Loki, the ever-malevolent trickster, decimates humanity just to torment his brother. And this apocalyptic landscape, Wolverine, after his own demise, becomes a new vessel for the awe-inspiring Phoenix Force. With this cosmic power coursing through his adamantium-laced veins, Wolverine exhibits an array of mind-bending abilities, even at one point going as far as to save Loki from the formidable Celestials. However, the terror takes on a different twist when a future iteration of Doctor Doom crosses this Wolverine's path, obliterating him. Yet thanks to the Phoenix Force, his demise is merely a minor setback. To secure Doctor Doom's defeat, Logan willingly sacrifices himself, channeling his power through Thor's mighty Mjolnir in the relentless battle. At number 2 is Akihiro. Akihiro, also known as Daken or Fang, is a chilling alternate version of Wolverine. During the Dark Reign storyline, when Norman Osborn took control of the comics, Daken emerges as a sinister counterpart. See, Osborn had formed Hammer and the Dark Avengers, a team comprised of rebranded villains as Avengers replacements. While Osborn attempted to recruit original Avengers, most of them declined. Daken, however, joined as Dark Wolverine. Akihiro might not currently be villainous, but during that time, he was a bona fide baddie. What makes him terrifying in the series is his lack of a moral code, even compared to his father, who isn't known for his strength. Daken, like Wolverine, is a highly skilled fighter and assassin, groomed from childhood to be a lethal weapon for Romulus against Logan. This alternate version of Wolverine is a dark reflection of the iconic hero. And at number 1 is Dark Claw. Dark Claw, a fusion of Marvel's Wolverine and DC's Batman from the Amalgam Universe, is undeniably one of the scariest alternate versions of Wolverine. Imagine the brooding intensity of Batman mixed with the raw, animalistic ferocity of Wolverine. It's a chilling combination, and Dark Claw inherits Bruce Wayne's wealth and tragic backstory, ensuring that he's a complex and deeply haunted character. But what truly sets him apart is his adamantium-coated skeleton and healing factor borrowed from Wolverine, obviously. This mending of two iconic, fear-inducing heroes creates a formidable force. Dark Claw embodies the fear of the night, blending the relentless pursuit of justice with the untamed power of Wolverine's regenerative abilities and his claws. Crossing paths with Logan Wayne would send shivers down anyone's spine.
Say what you will about X-Men Forever, but it did give us a rather unique version of Rogue. Rogue in this universe still had her absorption abilities, and when the X-Men were split into two factions thanks to the betrayal of Storm in this story, Rogue was teamed up with Gambit and Nightcrawler. Now Nightcrawler got a call from an old friend who needed help in Jackson, Mississippi, and Rogue offered to go along since she was from that area. Now when they got to the address, they found Mystique, who had actually faked the call, and in anger, Rogue attacked her for always interfering with her life, and she fell unconscious after hitting into a gas tank, which caused an explosion. Now when Nightcrawler got to her, she was not breathing, and so he gave her mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. She lived, but something had happened. Instead of just getting Kurt's powers, Rogue and Nightcrawler had actually both completely switched powers and appearances. While she initially hated her new blue appearance and tail, not to mention only having teleportation powers, she did eventually get to hang out with Spider-Man and get more accustomed to her new qualities, but then the whole thing got cancelled and we will never know more. Now Rogue is ordinarily one of the most powerful mutants in the 616 world. Her ability to absorb other people's powers makes her almost unbeatable in battle. However, in 1602, witch hunter Angela, a 17th century version of Rogue named Anna Maria, discovers that her absorption abilities are useless against the Enchantress, who uses magic to possess witch breeds, aka mutants. Without a teacher, Rogue's powers are pretty much completely untamed, and due to how deadly her absorption powers are, she was kept locked away in a tower. Well, that, and she was being used as a pawn in a twisted game between the Enchantress and a warrior called Angela. Now whilst Angela had made it her mission to eradicate any witch breed she met, she took pity on Anna Maria as she saw her as a sympathetic and tragic character. The Enchantress, though, eventually possessed Anna, and Angela had to bring her down, only for Anna Maria to be eventually resurrected later on. On Earth 616, Rogue can absorb others' powers, which gives her near limitless potential. However, her powers are dampened by control. Even though she trained under Charles Xavier for years, Rogue's control of her absorption abilities has never been that strong. But in Exiles number 99, writer Chris Claremont imagines a version of Rogue where control was never a problem. The reality hopping team known as the Exiles come across a young mutant named Anna Raven, who, like her Earth 616 twin, has absorption powers. However, this version of Rogue only absorbs through her hands as opposed to her entire body. This version can also recall the powers of every person she's ever touched, making her pretty darn capable. She also came from a rich family but rebelled, choosing to become an outlaw and master thief. Now whilst breaking into a vault one day, she was found by her world's Iron Man, but was saved by Morph of the Exiles. Joining the team, she dove straight into their mission of fixing broken realities. X-Men The End takes place 10 to 15 years in the future of an Earth known as Earth 41001. As you might guess from the name, the X-Men faced their end when several of their deadliest foes coordinated their attacks on them. Gambit and Rogue in this world had been running the occasional mission for the X-Men, but were still apart from them, living as a married couple and raising their two children, Olivier and Rebecca. Now Mr. Sinister manipulated Gambit into handing over the children to him, so in response, Rogue went to the Neverland camps and freed her children, but she was unfortunately wiped out by Mr. Sinister, who stabbed her in the back while he posed as Gambit, which is quite surprising given the fact that this Rogue still had the abilities of Carol Danvers. But moving over to the House of M reality, created by the Scarlet Witch that saw mutants becoming the dominant species of the Earth, Rogue's parents lost their lives when she was very young. Because of that, she spent some time in an orphanage, but when her mutant powers inevitably manifested, she earned the attention of S.H.I.E.L.D., which in this reality was run by Sebastian Shaw and allied tightly with Magneto, who ruled the Earth. Mystique was sent to recruit Rogue, and as usual, the two formed a bond. So much so that Mystique also adopted Rogue here as well. Rogue was trained well in the use of her powers until she was able to join the elite squad of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents known as the Red Guard, alongside Wolverine and her adoptive brother, Nightcrawler. In the Ultimate Universe, Rogue, who in this universe is named Marion Carlisle, was found and experimented on by Weapon X when she was still a young child. She was subsequently sent on many dangerous operations and missions. When the X-Men made a public appearance on a television show, Rogue was used by Weapon X to absorb some of Colossus's knowledge about their mansion's secrets. She reported said secrets to Weapon X, who subsequently captured the team. Now, the Brotherhood of Mutants would later rescue all the captured mutants, including Rogue, and after Weapon X was defeated, Rogue stayed with the Brotherhood, and when the President of the United States ordered the Ultimates to capture all Brotherhood-affiliated mutants, including including Rogue, she surrendered peacefully and was offered amnesty in exchange for her joining the X-Men, where she had a brief relationship with Iceman. Now later on, she was kidnapped by Gambit, whose employers gave Rogue a special suit that they developed with which she could control her powers. However, when Fenris, that organization, decided that Gambit was now useless and wanted him wiped out, he and Rogue fought them off together. Rogue then quit the X-Men, rejoining the team after Gambit was taken out and she had gained his powers. During Magneto's attack on New York, Rogue permanently absorbed the powers of Juggernaut, gaining his super strength, and she would eventually find herself living on the island of Utopia. In Infinity Countdown, Captain Marvel #1, the Prime Marvel Universe Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, went to visit alternate reality Earth 9289 using the power of the Reality Stone, since the gem linked her to the wielders of the gem in other realities. Now, funnily enough, the wielder of the gem in this reality was Anna Marie. In this reality, when Rogue infamously touched Miss Marvel to absorb her powers, Carol grabbed onto her arm and didn't let go. In addition to Carol's Kree DNA glitching out Rogue's powers, the prolonged contact caused each of these two to end up absorbing the powers, memories, and personality of the other completely. Now, Rogue sought out Professor X's help, but instead of her normal story, afterwards she went to space and as a consequence of an encounter with the Brood, gained the power boost to become binary. She looks awesome as binary, even if she doesn't look very different compared to Carol Danvers as the character. When Earth's heroes were taken to a distant planet by the Beyonder to perform in the Secret Wars, it was only because of the scientific mind of Reed Richards that they could return home. However, in the reality shown in What If number 114, Reed actually passed away, leaving both heroes and villains stuck there. Now over time, both parties decided to put their differences aside and just settle down. Rogue became romantically involved with Captain America of all people, only it's important to note that it wasn't really Rogue anymore who was in charge of her body, but again, the Carol Danvers personality took over. Carol, or Rogue, being able to control Rogue's absorption powers, had a kid with Captain America who they named Sarah. Their daughter had taken on Carol's powers, but she also could pick up Thor's hammer and often donned her father's shield as well, taking the codename Crusader. As is often the case with big names in Marvel and DC Comics, some of the coolest alternate versions of characters came from the big Amalgam event, where characters from Marvel and characters from DC were merged together to create entirely new characters with aspects of both. For the character of Rogue, she was amalgamated with the largely unknown DC character Gypsy, and went by the name Anna Marie Reynolds, aka Runaway. Despite being a fusion of the two, Runaway only really showed off her Rogue powers, abilities, and memory absorption powers in tandem with her flight and super strength, meaning she basically just had the same powers as Rogue, who had absorbed Carol Danvers' powers. Now Runaway was a former member of the Judgment League Avengers of Romani descent, who also curiously spoke with a strong Texan accent. And lastly, in 1994's What If second series number 66, while she and Mystique are on their way to Riker's Island to bust out the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, the pair run into the Avengers, and having already absorbed both Captain Marvel and Captain America's abilities, Rogue drains the mighty Thor to the point of his demise, and she proceeds to wreak havoc. She takes out the Vision and frees her comrades in arms, only to accidentally take them out too. After the Blob makes an ill-advised pass at her, she accidentally knocks him clean out of the plane they're in before exploding it and wiping out everyone on board, including Mystique. In her emotionally distraught state, she is approached by Loki, who convinces her that they need to attack Asgard. She agrees. When the time comes for her to lay the final blow on Odin, the sight of Odin's genuine grief at Thor's passing helps Rogue to access the residual memories of Thor in her psyche. With Thor explaining that he was an ideal as well as a person, Rogue was able to access the full powers of Thor. She then turns on the trickster god and defeats him before taking up the mantle of the new God of Thunder.
Professor X has had a lot of adventures across the multiverse, although I will say his alternate versions tend to either meet a tragic fate in most realities or otherwise just see him turn evil. In this reality, Charles and Magneto are not the ones to become Onslaught, but instead Jean and Magneto are. Like many other versions of Chuck that exist across the multiverse, this one dies earlier on, which causes events in this reality to splinter off and change. In the fight against Magneto, Charles ends up dead, and it is when this happens that Jean's latent and supreme powerful psychic abilities spark. This happens of course because Charles was the one who had put up barriers in Jean's mind to protect her from from this awesome power that she has. When he dies, the barriers basically go with him. Jean is the one who ends up shutting down Magneto's mind, and as a result, the two psyches merge to create this universe, Earth 696's version of Onslaught. This version of Charles and Jean and Onslaught first appeared in Original X-Men issue number 1, which only came out last year in 2023. Who would you like to see combined together to give us an Onslaught, and what do you think would be different about that? A truly nasty version of Charles, this alternate version is known as Herr Xavier. In this reality, known as Earth 597, the Germans instead won World War II, which changes things quite a bit. The Professor X we see here becomes a villain who is responsible for taking out Angel and Beast. Instead of the X-Men, we have the Reichsmen, which is made up of some of our standard X-Men members that we're familiar with from Earth 616. And we also have their opposing team, Lightning Force, which is also made up of different characters who parallel the current members of the Excalibur team. This version of Charles first appeared in the Excalibur one-shot Excalibur Weird War 3. On Earth 12, all heroes, even mutant heroes, are basically treated like celebrities, Professor X included. This version of Charles hails from the same reality as Calvin Rankin from the multiversal reality-hopping Exiles team. In fact, Charles was actually Calvin Rankin, aka Mimic's mentor on Earth 12, before he went off and was recruited to join the Exiles. In this reality, Calvin ended up going on to lead the X-Men thanks to Professor X's mentorship. When Blink heads to this reality to return Calvin's body after his death during his time serving on the Exiles team, this version of Professor X actually offers Blink a place with his own X-Men. Unfortunately, Blink was called to help save another reality, and so she could not accept Charles's offer. I love visiting the 1602 reality. Here, Professor X is known as Carlos Javier. He would end up running a school that sought to find and recruit Witchbreed, which are like mutants kind of in the 1602 reality. The 1602 reality takes place in that very same year that it gets its name from, while also being known in terms of its designated reality number as Earth 311. This reality's creation resulted from Captain America being banished, sent through time by Purple Man to be lost so that he would become MIA, and to avoid the fallout from the hero's destruction, which would then of course have made Cap a martyr, a symbol for the people that Purple Man was oppressing to rally around. This was after Purple Man had basically come to rule the world, or a version of it anyways. As a result, the past was changed and Marvel's heroes started appearing sooner in comparison to when they showed up in the Earth 616 reality, in terms of our timelines. Kane, Marco, and Professor X end up becoming friends in this reality, often known as MC2. It's believed that they share the same origin as their Earth 616 counterparts, but instead Juggernaut ended up reforming later on in life. Actually kind of like what's been happening recently in the comics with Juggernaut. This version of Charles made his first appearance in a flashback in the Wild Thing series in issue number 5. Wild Thing is a series that follows the adventures of the daughters of Logan and Elektra in the MC2 reality, aka Earth 982. You see, we get to explore what the world could be like if superheroes were basically allowed to age, retire, and settle down. This is also where Spider-Girl comes from. This one is pretty great, but also pretty goofy in some respects. In this world and what if story, we answer the question, what if Professor X had become the Juggernaut? In case you were wondering, we would get an extremely beefy version of Charles here. Honestly, I do think the story is pretty interesting too. When Kane was about to touch the gem of Sidorak, instead, Charles pushes him out of the way and he accidentally comes into contact with it. This grants him the powers of the Juggernaut, but also, like Kane, he gets trapped in the cave following the cave-in that ensues. When he finally emerges as the Juggernaut, he'll face off against Magneto, who is threatening the United Nations, and he'll ultimately beat him and then convince Magneto's team, the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, to become the X-Men and work with and for Charles. With this X-Men team, Juggernaut would in essence conquer the world, protecting mutants but, not really caring so much about the fate of humans. Eventually, the X-Men and Magneto work together to overthrow Charles and send him hurtling through space. This all goes down in the second series of What If in issue number 13 if you wanted to check it out. This version of Charles, also known as MODOK, hails from the Age of Apocalypse reality, or AOA. AOA, aka Earth 295, was created as a result of Charles Xavier's death happening. This happening early also puts events in motion that basically allow Apocalypse to seize power, with him going on to rule the world, hence why we call it Age of Apocalypse. So if Charles is dead here, how does he become MODOK? Well, this specific version of Chuck is not actually the original version, but is instead a clone, or at least a clone of Xavier's brain, who apparently has no will of his own, and just, yeah, he's MODOK. It looks great. Looks like MODOK to me. This version of Professor X hails hails from the alternate reality of Earth 804, as glimpsed briefly in What If issue number 20 from the first What If comic series. Here we see the answer to the question, what if the Avengers had fought the Kree-Skrull War without Rick Jones? Unlike many other realities, Charles actually doesn't die here, but Rick Jones does. Charles also doesn't even become evil here, how cool. And the events here actually force Charles to take a more prominent role in this story, where he ends up as a leader for Earth and all of its heroes in their fight against the Kree, who are basically attempting to conquer the planet. This version of Charles Xavier hails from the Mutant X reality. Havoc gets transported to this reality after he seemingly dies in the comics. Instead though, his psyche was basically like thrown through the multiverse and into the body of another Havoc in another reality. This Havoc had seemingly just died when the Earth 616 version of the character entered his mind and his body, allowing him to live on. Earth 616 Havoc would go on to live basically a whole life in the Mutant X reality, meeting tons of alternate versions of the 616 characters, including Madeline Pryor, who would become his wife, and whom he would also have a son with. What is it with Havoc and having children that exist solely in alternate realities? That is a weird thing that Havoc has. He like gets to know them and then he's like, anyways, back to 616. Here, Havoc was the sole Summers brother who lived as well. Professor X was one of the characters from this reality, and obviously we're going to talk about him. Xavier becomes a villain in the Mutant X reality known as Earth 1298 after being corrupted by the Shadow King. Yeah, this version of Charles is one of the evil ones. He goes on to team up with Sinister at one point in a plot to take the power of all of Earth's telepaths for himself. Pretty evil. This plot ends up actually being so evil, so dastardly, so deadly, that Sinister even turns on Xavier, attempting to stop him. You know your plot is evil when Mr. Sinister's like, you know what, actually, I think I'm gonna stop you there. This is just a fun little goofy one, and I feel like a really fun way to end this video. In this universe, the X-Men are instead known as the Rex-Men. Here, they're all doggos. This appearance of Charles comes from one of the little short stories seen in Millennial Visions. Always a fun and bizarre, just comic collection of stories to revisit. This story was titled Universe Rex. Here, Professor Rex's Rex Dogs team includes dog versions of Colossus, Bishop, Storm, Gambit, Wolverine, and Banshee. Wild.
Gambit, the Cajun sensation. He is a lot of people's favorite X-Man, and he's certainly one of mine. But what's he like in alternate realities? After multiple bodily injuries, Gambit and the X-Men belonging to the alternate reality of Earth 1011 began to replace their bodies with cybernetic parts. Eventually, this led to their entire bodies being replaced after their original bodies aged beyond use. Each X-Men downloaded their consciousness into cybernetic bodies designed after their original costumes. Turns out, that isn't really a terribly great idea. Their cybernetic brains began to become overcrowded with too much information, which led to their mental faculties basically breaking, leaving only the goal to save mutant kind as their primary directive. Because of this, they became the X-Sentinels, and in a twist of what we are used to with Sentinels, they started to hunt humans, leaving only mutants safe. The new Sun is an alternate Gambit that most Gambit fans do know about, and that's because he is Remy who reached his full potential. His parents were paid by the government project Alpha 1 to have a child based on their genetic potential. The child was raised by Alpha 1 and trained in the use of his powers before he even had them, so that by the time they manifested, he was able to escape the facility where he was being held. New Sun had control over kinetic energy at a molecular level. After being taken in by John Luke, Gambit learned that he was intended to become the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy to create heaven on Earth. Unfortunately, when he charged up his power in a special ritual, a chain reaction was started that caused everyone on Earth beside himself to completely burn up. The new Sun traveled to other universes hoping to prevent the same thing from happening there. Coming to the main Marvel universe, he first attempted to create a new world where everyone would eventually be transported to using the main reality's Gambit to help. But when he learned that his plan wasn't possible, he tried to take out Gambit, transporting both of them to his destroyed homeworld before he became a threat to the main universe's Earth world as well. One version of Gambit who comes pretty much entirely out of left field is the one from Earth 6706. This Gambit is Remy Mackenzie, and he is the firstborn son of an alternate Afro-Atlantean Prince Namor Mackenzie and his wife, Susan Storm, the Invisible Woman. So already this Remy Remy is wildly different. Obviously, he has the Atlantean abilities passed down by his father, but from his mother, he has gained telekinesis strong enough to allow himself to fly and to lift heavy steel beams, while also gaining psionic force fields, which he has used to create hover discs and even a psionic sword. When the exiles visited this Earth, Gambit was excited about the chance for adventure with them and he joined up, but after a few months with the team, he was called back home to take over his father's kingdom, as that version of Namor had been slain in battle. With the exiles' help, Gambit was able to defeat the rebels and he united his Earth peacefully under his own rule. Experimenting with attempts to recreate the Captain Britain Corps, Jamie Braddock created a pocket reality in which England was at war with Krakoa. The Betsy Braddock of this pocket reality had teamed up with the mutant team Excalibur, made up of Richter, Rogue, Jubilee, and of course, Gambit. Now, after escaping London with the help of Cape Pride, the group were confronted by Jamie Braddock, who revealed that he intended to make Betsy the first of a new Captain Britain Corps. Turns out that she was not a fan, and so a fight ensued. Now, after Betsy was struck down, this pocket reality then fractured again, and all four of the mutants from Excalibur were all offered an Amulet of Right, and all became versions of Captain Britain, creating a new Captain Britain Corps. X-Men in the End takes place 10 to 15 years in the future on an Earth known as Earth 41001. As you might guess from the name, the X-Men faced their end when several of their deadliest foes coordinated their attacks on them. Gambit and Rogue in this world had been running the occasional mission for the X-Men, but were still apart from them, living as a married couple and raising their two children, Oliver and Rebecca. Now, one of the villains, Mr. Sinister, had also put a target on these two kids, and in order to protect both his children and those of Cyclops and Emma Frost, Gambit took them kids and brought them to Sinister himself. This is when Sinister dropped the bombshell that Gambit was actually the third Summers brother, as Mr. Sinister had created him years ago by mixing some of Cyclops' DNA with his own to act as the ultimate weapon against the mutant apocalypse. That's a lot to lay on a guy, and when Rogue lost her life against Sinister's forces, Gambit completely snapped, turned on Sinister together with Mystique, and once the villain was laid low, he actually took Sinister's place to try and undo some of the damage that he had done. Formerly an X-Men and good friend of their leader, Magneto, in the Age of Apocalypse reality, this Gambit left the team pretty heartbroken when Rogue fell for the wrinkly old Magneto. Gambit founded his own team, the Externals, and found some comfort and romance with the mutant Lila Cheney. Eventually, Magneto called on Gambit's help specifically because of Remy's teleporting girlfriend, Lila. Using Lila's power, Gambit and his team travel across the galaxy to steal a piece of the Macron crystal. But in order to take from the crystal, Gambit apparently had to sacrifice the love that he felt for Rogue and was granted a shard of the crystal. Having succeeded in their mission, the Externals returned to Earth only to be betrayed by one of their own. Now, after Apocalypse's defeat, Remy joined the X-Men to help them rebuild again. And for about a decade, Earth prospered. Eventually though, a reborn Apocalypse re-established his world order, and Gambit passed away fighting his minions to buy his true love, Rogue, and her fellow X-Men enough time to escape. What a roller coaster of emotion. In the regular Earth 616 reality, after the X-Men learned of Gambit's involvement in the mutant massacre, they felt pretty betrayed, but still they eventually forgave their teammate. But what if they didn't? In the reality shown in What If Volume 1, number 106, the revelation of his involvement drove a huge wedge between the X-Men and Gambit, with the founding member Archangel, formerly Angel, especially having a whole lot of hatred for the Cajun. It's kind of understandable though, since the mutant massacre is what caused Warren to first ever lose his wings. Eventually, Archangel hunted Gambit down and challenged him to a duel to the death, except during the fight, Remy stopped fighting back, correctly guessing that Archangel would realize that taking Remy's life wouldn't really solve anything. But no one thought about the mutant Marrow. She very much felt otherwise and took Gambit down, ramming one of her bone daggers into his chest. With his dying breath, Remy basically asked the X-Men to forgive her and end the cycle of violence. In the world of Marvel Noir, superheroes don't really exist in the same way they do on Earth 616. There are very few who have legit superpowers, and the mutants who normally make up the X-Men are actually a group of sociopaths sociopathic teenagers recruited by discredited psychiatrist Charles Xavier, who ran the Xavier School for Exceptionally Wayward Youth in Westchester, New York in 1937. In this world, Gambit is just Remy LeBeau, an ally of Thomas Holloway, the vigilante known as Angel, and he is also the owner of the Creole Club, a casino and a nightclub. He was also a pretty bad dude and was not above resorting to physical altercations in order to retrieve his debts, which was actually his downfall. Remy had been harassing Wanda Magnus over unpaid debts, and that got him sent to the pearly gates by a vengeful Peter Magnus in retaliation. And in case you didn't pick up on it, that is Wanda and Pietro Maximoff of the noir reality. In another alternate reality though, coming to us in the X-Men Forever world of Earth 161, the X-Men found their world forever change, with members dropping in and out and some even swapping their powers. One constant in all of that was Gambit, who turned into one of the group's most reliable mainstays. This version of the Cajun sensation was actually named Remy Picard instead of LeBeau. This version of Gambit replaced his flashy costume with dark shades, a black suit, a red shirt, and a tie. Also, in this world, instead of starting a relationship with Rogue, Jean-Luc Picard Jr. had a relationship with Kitty Pryde. And last up today, we end with a mystery. In the alternate future known as the XSE future, which is the timeline that the mutant Bishop comes from, there was an elderly man named LeBeau, who was also known as the Witness. The Witness was called that because he was said to have been the last person to have ever seen the X-Men before they were wiped out. Shortly after Bishop came to the present time, back in the day, he recognized Earth 616 Gambit as the same man, only around 60 to 80 years younger. That on its own is pretty interesting, but later on, the Witness also made an appearance in the present day, and he also revealed that he existed simultaneously in all timelines at once. But this leaves the mystery of who the Witness, aka LeBeau, really is. It could be that at some point Gambit's powers evolve into him becoming the Witness, or maybe the Witness is Gambit's future offspring. What do you guys think?
There are thousands of Magnetos across the multiverse. Some versions would shock even the biggest Magneto fan. There is a steampunk version of Magneto, and that is the coolest thing I have ever seen.
Number 6. Public Enemy Number 1. This story comes at us from the line of what if stories we got in 2006. It tells the tale of James Howlett, Logan, Wolverine, who ends up teaming up with Matteo DiPergio in Chicago to defeat criminal and mob boss Scarface. Here, Logan becomes a version of, I guess, the Skull, the man responsible for killing Scarface, but he also becomes something else. He wears a flag on his chest that shows the Jolly Roger and this skull and crossbones symbol, as well as the backstory of his family, who were burnt to a crisp, are meant to also make him another feared vigilante character, well known in the Marvel Universe as the Punisher. And when I say his family was burnt to a crisp, I mean like killed, burnt to a crisp, not like they got a bad sunburn, just so you know. This is a dark and gritty tale that also gives us a pretty awesome historical atmosphere, as well as an overall gangster story tone that's quite dark and draws you in. It's both scary and intriguing, which is how I like anything that's scary personally. I'm like, this is scary, but it makes me think, which I like. Number 5. What if Prince Namor of Atlantis grew up on land? This story's title doesn't inherently make it sound scary, and yet. Namor here, instead of siding with his own people of Atlantis and that heritage, decides to align himself with land dwellers, turning his back on the sea. He still fought in World War II, but during that time lost his friend, the android known as the Human Torch, or Jim Hammond. So, not Johnny Storm, different Human Torch. Immortalized as a hero, the Human Torch's memory lives on, but so too, does it seem, did he. 30 years later, the government gets a signal, which they think is from the Human Torch, calling out, repeating the same word he was saying on repeat when he went missing: Namor. Namor is sent in to investigate and finds his people have been enslaved by a race of half-human and half-Atlantean people who it turns out are still allied with Germany and the Axis, despite the war being long over. They plan on using the Human Torch under the sea to create a huge and damaging explosion. Namor prevents their plans, but is then ordered to destroy Atlantis, despite the fact that those enslaved are trying to fight back. In the end, he refuses to harm his own people, but the government doesn't care and they blow them up anyways, leaving Namor to once again live up to the meaning of his name, Avenging Sun. They also thought they killed Namor, but they didn't. Namor's not that easy to kill. Number 4. What if the Marvel superheroes had lost Atlantis attacks? Yes, what if? Atlantis attacks is such a weird story. Well, the world would basically be ruled by snake people is the answer, and yeah, that's what happens here. Here, Set is not prevented from arriving and being released upon the world. Once the Elder God does arrive, he sets to work raising the planet and turning everyone into his snake people, including some of our favorite heroes. In the end, only a handful of heroes and villains are left to set everything right, and even they fail. Quasar does manage in the end to defeat Set, but the world is still left covered in giant snakes and snake people with no foreseeable way to fix it, and many of our favorite heroes and villains are left either transformed into snake people or dead. Pretty scary. Number 3, what if the Avengers had become the pawns of Korvac? In this reality, we examined what would happen had Korvac been successful in defeating Earth's mightiest heroes, the Avengers, and succeeded in standing up against all who opposed him because of the constant love of a woman. You can do anything if you have the love of a good person, apparently. In the end, Michael Korvac brings some of the heroes back to life to serve him as he goes up against even mightier enemies. Armed with the ultimate nullifier at the end, however, Korvac uses it to bring ultimate order to all things, which actually results in everything being destroyed in that reality, including the entire reality itself. So I guess bringing order means killing everything? I guess you can't have disorder if there's nothing. Number 2, Kingdom of Cain. This What If story comes to us from issue 94 of Volume 2, the 1989 What If series. Here we see the Juggernaut roams the post-apocalyptic landscape of the Earth completely alone, the sole survivor after a disastrous Sentinel attack which decimated the Earth's heroes and the Earth itself by leaking radiation poisoning all over the place. Juggernaut seems to be the only one capable of living in this place, and he becomes almost driven mad by the loneliness, because he's the only one. Until he discovers that not everyone is dead, but actually some people have survived and are living in safety in an underground bunker. This discovery comes after he runs into Magneto, who tells Juggernaut that he knows for certain, having peered into alternate timelines, that this is all his fault, and that everyone that was killed all happened because he himself killed Charles Xavier, his stepbrother. When Cain finds the rest of the mutants who have survived, he hastily breaks through into their bunker, thereby exposing them to the radiation poisoning on the Earth's surface, and ultimately kills them too, albeit by accident, which, yeah, it's really sad. He's like, I don't want to be mean, I just want to talk to someone, and they're like, we're dying now because of you, get out of here. No one wants to talk to you, Cain. Number 1, what if the Fantastic Four's second child had lived? This doesn't sound like it should be the scariest story on the list, but it definitely is. The first story in this series is just a straight up horror story where Sue ends up giving birth to a healthy baby girl, but dying herself in childbirth. And that's not even the scary part. From the beginning, the doctors warned her that her pregnancy would be difficult, and from the beginning, Franklin Richards knew something was wrong with his unborn sister. Is like the most dark, menacing face. When the baby does come into the world, who's named after her deceased mother, so I guess like Sue Jr., it's revealed that she is actually an energy-draining monster who kills those around her by feeding on their life force energy. Franklin is finally able to convince his father of this, but too late, as Reed dies in the ensuing battle, leaving Franklin all alone. Just a sad orphan. Also, yeah, he was so right. His sister's like a straight-up demon monster thing. Yikes. Number 6, what if the Fantastic Four had different superpowers? And kind of random ones at that. Although they are explained as to why they make sense. But anyways, we'll get to that in a second. One of the weirdest of these powers being Reed Richards' powers. Each of their transformations in the story just draw more inspiration from their own personality itself, which is why everything is so strange. Which means in this scenario that Reed becomes just a floating disembodied brain with telepathic abilities. He goes by the name of Big Brain and travels throughout the Baxter Building, or its alternate reality equivalent, via a network of tubes that the FF had installed. Here Susan Storm gains powers which allow her to stretch, basically like Mr. Fantastic would have had. Johnny Storm becomes Mandroid, he's a robot, and Ben Grimm becomes Dragonfly. He's got wings. They look like dragon wings. The whole feel for me is more comparable to the awesome strangeness that is DC's Doom Patrol in this issue, which I don't hate because I like Doom Patrol. What if the Punisher was a stern yet fatherly type? I feel like it's more gentle, but it's the Punisher, so apparently it's hardcore. This is a little one-page story from What If, but I just enjoy it too much, so I had to share it with you. It shows us a very different kind of Punisher, a less grizzled and frightening Frank Castle, and much more disappointed in you guilt-trip dad version of the anti-hero instead. Still, people telling you that they are disappointed in you, it really sucks. So I can almost imagine this version of Frank as being actually pretty successful, especially given how fragile the egos and emotional states of most villains are. I feel like that punishment that Galactus is given in this story looks also impressively challenging given how large Galactus is and how tiny that piece of chalk is that he has to write with. It makes me think of just metal on a chalkboard, which is I just got chills up my spine thinking of it, both while I was writing this and actually just now as I was saying this. Anytime someone talks about metal or nails on a chalkboard, sorry if I triggered anyone. What if the X-Men lost Inferno? AKA, what if Sim and the Soul Sword had simultaneously returned to their accustomed spot in Limbo? Apparently. That's like the secondary question we're given in the story. In this issue, we learn what would have happened if the X-Men lost to Madeline Pryor. In this alternate reality, Sim and Maddie end up as kind of a power couple for a time, with Wolverine as their villainous pet, whom they feed human babies to, which a feral Logan apparently devours with glee. Wow. He doesn't even seem to be able to resist their making him into a monster, which is, strange, but yeah, I guess he's just fine with it. Rachel Summers, Phoenix, who is trapped inside a mannequin, does end up returning, giving the surviving heroes hope after the world is overrun by demons. Although also in this reality, Jean is killed by Madeline, so we don't have any Jean to save us. Wolverine kills Maddie as a reanimated skeleton after she seizes the Phoenix Force for herself, saving the world before he perishes. It's always strange when you have a skeleton Wolverine just killing people. Snicked, snicked. He also manages to kill Kitty before this while he is evil, which I'm like, Kitty, why didn't you just don't let yourself get hit? That's like your whole thing, but okay. This issue ends with Alicia Masters Storm, who is obviously the Human Torch's paramour here, giving birth to a baby in the new world, assisted by Rachel and Doctor Strange. Yay? I love you, baby. What a weird thing to say to your babies. I just feel like it's such a strange do mothers say that when their babies are born? I love you, baby. Number 3. What if the Fantastic Four all had the same power as Human Torch? This is a weird and depressing story that is one of 4 different stories included in an issue that asks the question, what if the Fantastic Four all had the same power? The answer when it comes to the Human Torch's power is that the FF gets reckless and basically endangers human lives. In this story, we see the Flame On family accidentally set a building on fire while fighting, a building that happened to have a woman's baby inside named Angel while she was working at a cafe across the street. Don't worry, she had a sitter, the baby wasn't alone or anything, but still. It's not good. The FF realizes too late that the building has caught fire. They're able to save some people, but they can't save the baby, and the story ends tragically there. So I guess them all having flame powers would not be good. We shouldn't do that in the main continuity. It'd be sad. Number 2. What if Conan the Barbarian were stranded in the 20th century? If you were around for part 1 of this list, you'll know Conan visited modern day New York once in the What If series. This time around we answer the question, what if he never left? Here Conan gets into more trouble, is arrested instead of leaving, but escapes the law and ends up as a sort of unaware villain. I don't think he knows he's a villain, but he's definitely pretty villainous. He ends up working alongside criminals and returns to Danette, the cab driver he fell in love with previously, in an attempt to impress her with his new clothes and his wealth. She tells him she isn't into this new Conan, who she describes as looking like a pimp. I mean, he does have like a leopard or something on a chain. Leopard? Cheetah? What do we call that animal? What do you call an animal with spots? In the end, this path leads Conan to an epic battle with Captain America, which ends with Cap offering him a place on the Avengers, basically in a weird turn of events. Captain America's like, I respect you, also you got some problems, you should join the Avengers. Conan does not accept this offer, but he does ponder it at the end of the issue, as he looks like wistfully out the window in a very tight t-shirt. I think he needs a bigger t-shirt. Number 1. What if Thanos changed Galactus into a human being? This issue is just ridiculous good fun. This is the first story featured in the 1989 issue What If No One Was Watching the Watcher. Here we see Thanos decide to punish Galactus, whom he is fighting in an even worse way than by killing him. Instead, Thanos turns Galactus mortal and he appears on Earth with no recollection of who he is, and coincidentally looking a lot like Elvis Presley. He is found by a waitress named Gertrude who takes him in and believes herself that he is an amnesiac Elvis. She educates him on what she thinks is his history and his music, and weirdly enough Galactus also has the ability to sing just like Elvis. Huh? He ends up falling in love with music and starts playing and gaining prominence as people believe he is the real king returned from the supposed dead. He even refuses to return to his life as a god when Adam Warlock finds him and reveals the truth about his history. That's just how much Galactus loves music and his new life with Gertrude and her son. I love it. Number 10. What if Mary Jane had been shot instead of Aunt May? This is a really epic and dark story where Peter ends up going on a rampage when Mary Jane is killed by Kingpin's hired sniper assassin instead of Aunt May. Peter manages to save Aunt May, but Mary Jane ends up dead, and as a result Pete dons his black suit and goes after the Kingpin himself. He is met with resistance when Tony Stark as Iron Man attempts to confront him and talk sense into him. Spider-Man, however, is too far gone and is definitely not in the mood for advice from Tony Stark. This results in an epic fight between the two heroes while Wilson Fisk's life hangs in the balance of who will win. In the end, Peter ends up getting his revenge, one-punching Fisk to death before being arrested by the authorities. He regrets ever trusting Tony Stark and ever marrying Mary Jane. As Wilson Fisk would say, this issue is so goth. Number 9. What if Spider-Man became the Punisher? This one ends up at least having a happy ending, but starts off being pretty dark and pretty scary. In this story, we imagine what life would have been like for Peter if he had become the Punisher. Instead of beating his villains and them ending up just locked away, for many, their fate is much more final. Even the Green Goblin ends up being killed by Spider-Man Punisher following the confrontation with Gwen at the bridge. Gwen, however, lives, not killed from the great height from which she was dropped. I do love how they keep drilling in that it would be the fall, not the impact, that would kill her, like in the original story, which I always thought was so bizarre. Spider-Man Punisher saves Gwen, but Green Goblin ends up dead, and Harry swears vengeance on the man who killed his father. Although this story has a dark and murderous narrative, it gives us a more happy ending, sort of. Peter chooses love instead of vengeance in the end and gives up being the Punisher, retiring from vigilante life to go be happy with Gwen. As this decision is made, however, Frank Castle loses his family and miraculously survives the shootout in Central Park, in the end becoming the Punisher in this reality as was fated. Although I do think it's really weird in that story that like Gwen living is the thing that like changes that for him. If your like girlfriend's life was threatened, wouldn't that make you more angry? Maybe not. I've never been Spider-Man, so I don't really know. Alright friends, before we move on to this next spot, just a quick reminder to click that thumbs up. It's good for your health, it's good for your heart, it's good for your brain. Number 8. What if Ord resurrected Jean Grey instead of Colossus? In this story, Jean is brought back to life at a time where it is revealed that Cassandra Nova holds influence over Emma Frost. Fearing the return of the Phoenix Force, which would join to Jean Grey once more, Emma decides to take matters into her own hands. Her own diamond hands. It's revealed that the Phoenix Force has been lurking within her cuckoo's minds, and she decides to take hold of it, killing them in the process. Tragic. She then plans on defeating Jean. The X-Men band together to face her, and S.H.I.E.L.D. and S.W.O.R.D. also conveniently join the fray. Like, we're here too. In the end, Ord, Beast, Emma, and her cuckoos and Kitty lay dead, and the Phoenix is contained, but Cassandra remains undetected, still out there waiting for the right moment to strike. Number 7. What If? The Spider Who Went Into the Cold. This story comes to us from the What If story Spider-Man vs. Wolverine, and asks the question, what if Spider-Man never came back out from the cold? This story sees Peter Parker actually kill someone while acting as Spider-Man. It was an accident. He thought the person had armor that would protect him from the hit, but it was powered down. Of course, who should be working alongside Spidey when this happens but of course Wolverine, who shows no remorse for what Spider-Man has done, jokingly suggesting that they cry about it. In the end, this event changes Peter after he and Wolverine save his friend Alex, and this causes him to become a killing machine. He receives further training, and although he still has a sense of morality, no longer has qualms with taking out the bad guys permanently. He leaves MJ and his life behind, setting out to join S.H.I.E.L.D., working taking on as a hired Black Ops team. Also, I love a good Spider-Man Wolverine team up because it's just not what you usually get. I love when they team up. Number 6. What if Iron Man had been a traitor? I personally think this one is pretty scary if you put yourself in Iron Man's shoes. For me, one of my biggest fears, and I think one of the most human fears out there, is just a lack of control. In Tony Stark's case, he doesn't really have any control over what he does or how he acts in this story, but is forced into being a traitor when a rival country gains control of his heart. If he refuses to do as is demanded of him, he is put through intense and unyielding chest pains and could be killed. This ends up putting him on a path to attempt to kill Reed Richards, all while leaving a trail of breadcrumbs for Reed to follow so that he might be able to figure out that Stark's actions are not his true intentions and that he is being manipulated into harming his compatriots and betraying his country. Number 5. What if the man, the monster? This is actually one of the scariest ones for me in my opinion. This story was such an intense story that we didn't even get an introduction from the Watcher Juliana. Here we have a story where the roles are reversed between Bruce and the Hulk, where Bruce is the monster and the Hulk, or Starman as he's known here, is the sensitive, compassionate one. Here Bruce Banner is a colonel who marries Betty only to mistreat her after being traumatized from years of being mistreated by his own father and witnessing the cruelty his father doled out to his mother. The gamma radiation does split Banner into two beings here, transforming him into another creature with immense power, but this creature is the side of him that actually represents the compassionate side of this trauma, the side who wants to protect, not hurt, whereas Bruce Banner himself becomes the malicious monster. We hear this story from Betty's perspective, who ends up trying to speak out on the way Bruce has treated her, only to have her father not even believe her and send her back to Bruce once she's left, and to later have her confession to Doc Samson manipulated by Colonel Banner, causing her to end up getting sent to a mental institution. Also, I'm not sure what's happening in this last panel of this comic, if it's just like she doesn't know that they're about to come get her and take her away, or if she's there and she's just like, it's fine that I'm here. I'm gonna assume it's the first one, because otherwise that's a really weird way to end that story. Number 4. What if Legion had killed Xavier and Magneto? Just imagine how messed up Age of Apocalypse would be, but also you don't have to because the story's gonna do it for you. Thank you, What If. As always, when things get this bad, we have Nate to save the day. Nate Summers believes he can band together his own team of the few heroes left alive after Apocalypse's unopposed rise to take down Apocalypse and even travel back to the past to make things right. Silly Nate Summers. Instead, this only results in Captain America and Wolverine. Wolverine's hair here, by the way, is the real horror show of this story, opposing Nate's plan once it is revealed. Seeing Nate in Apocalypse's armor after Nate has defeated Apocalypse causes them to believe that Nate is trying to kind of take the place of Apocalypse and in essence become a new kind of tyrant, but a tyrant all the same. As Nate uses the Eye of Agamotto and Molecule Man to travel back in time to what he doesn't know is an alternate reality's past, Captain America, armed with Thor's hammer, sends a bolt of lightning after him that kills thousands in that past, setting in motion the apocalypse once more. Number 3. What if Danger became a bride of Ultron? I like how the title is a bride, even though in this reality Danger becomes like the ultimate bride of Ultron. A bride, as though in this reality Ultron is like multiple brides. I feel like that never works out for him, to be honest. But either way, this gives Ultron what he has always truly desired. That sweet, sweet love connection. I mean, completion. Yes. Completion. That's what he's looking for. After Danger rebels against the X-Men seeking revenge basically for years of being used and trapped as their danger room with no one acknowledging her sentience, Ultron hears her calling out, senses her, and leaves his creation Victor, destroying him in order to find her. The two come together and as a wedding present, Ultron gives Danger her father, Professor X, helpless against the technology as his telepathic powers don't work on them. Ultron has him crushed and killed. The story ends with Danger and Ultron soaring off to bring havoc to the universe, flying through space on their creepy mishmashed Sentinel child. It's like a scary story, but it's also a romance story at the same time. Number 2. What if Wolverine was never deprogrammed? This is a pretty scary and gruesome one, I'm not gonna lie. Though, you know, still keeping in line with the PG-13 aspect of comics, a lot of the gore is hidden, but you can still imagine it, and when you imagine what's happening to these people here, it's pretty insane. Here we get to imagine what if Wolverine just kept on being a killing machine, brainwashed into taking out his fellow heroes, including all of those that he loved. As in many of these potential scenarios, it comes down to Wolverine and Kitty Pryde. Kitty is unable to fathom how Wolverine could be so far gone that he'd kill her, and yet after witnessing the death of everyone at his hands, including Invisible Woman, who is clawed through the bottom of her feet before getting claws right through her face, and Captain America, who gets claws right up through the bottom of his jaw through his entire head, she is forced to confront the reality that her mentor and friend Logan is really gone. Like, that's definitely gonna convince you once you see that. You're like, okay, there's no hope for you. In the end, she sacrifices her hand, and it's implied her life in killing Wolverine. She phases her hand through his head, turning it solid, and then letting go as Wolverine instinctively slices off her arm, preventing his body from being unable to heal due to the hand lodged in his brain. That'll definitely prevent someone from healing. I don't even want to think about how you try to do that. How do you function with a hand in your brain? I ask you. Number 1. What if Spider-Man had rejected the spider? This is a pretty creepy, crawly, scary one. It begins with Peter Cocoon but refusing to take the spider's path home. Instead, he kills the giant spider that confronts him while in metamorphosis, remaining lost and unable to move forward, only half a being, until Venom escapes Matt Gargan and prison in order to rejoin with Peter Parker, aware that he is stuck in this stasis mode and vulnerable. Venom bonds with the Cocoon, and after months of battling with Peter inside, is eventually reborn as a new being who goes by the name Poison. Half Peter, half Venom symbiote, permanently bonded. Poison confronts Mary Jane at the Avengers Mansion, but after horrifically attacking her, Aunt May, Wolverine, and Luke Cage, and being spurned by her, disappears, resurrecting his first love, Gwen Stacy, and likely planning to turn her into his monstrous bride. Also, there's a weird thing that happens in that story where that poison basically pierces Luke Cage's skin, and then he's like, haha, even I can pierce your stone skin because I'm sharp enough, and I was like, wait, what just happened? Doesn't really make a lot of sense. But other than that, it's all pretty good, I think.
Number 10. What if the Avengers battled the Carnage Cosmic? Carnage Cosmic is a version of Carnage where he is bonded to none other than the Silver Surfer. During the first appearance of this hypothetical monstrosity, Carnage simply used Silver Surfer as a mode of transportation to get back to his beloved host, Cletus Cassidy. However, in issue 108 of What If Volume 2 in the 1989 series, we examine what would happen if the villain became more of a greater threat. It takes all of the Avengers to even stand a chance against him, and even then they are overwhelmed. In the end, Silver Surfer is forced to fly into the sun to get rid of this stubborn and deadly symbiote, which also means he has to fight for control all the while. Number 9. What if Rick Jones became the Hulk? Okay, so admittedly this story is more silly than scary, but if you actually think through everything Rick Jones goes through here and the fate of Hulk at the end of the story, it can be seen as, well, being pretty scary. Also, I just really like it. Like Annihilus' voice and demeanor, it's both a scary and raunchy story. Yeah, you heard me right, raunchy. Don't ask me, Rick is the one that mentions Annihilus' raunchiness in this issue. Here we see Rick not only become the big green Goliath, but we also watch as he finds himself bonded with Captain Marvel as well, sharing a body with him. So, just a lot going on all at once in my opinion. You'd think we'd swap his Marvel Negaband story for the Hulk one, but no, we're not going to do that. In this reality, both happen. In the end, Mr. Fantastic and a normal Bruce Banner end up helping Rick return to normal, but Hulk remains trapped in the Negazone with Annihilus, so they kind of get like separated. He makes quick work of the villain while in the Negazone, then remains stuck there for forever? He doesn't seem to mind at the end of the story, but I feel like if we checked back on him in a few months, he wouldn't be quite as happy. Seems like a strangely happy spin on what should be a pretty dark ending. I also just like how everyone after is like, it turned out great for everyone, or for most of us. What, how's Hulk? And Rick's just like, I'm sure he's fine. Cut to Hulk having the best time. And before we move on to our number 8 spot, just a quick reminder, if you're enjoying this list and lists like this, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. It really does help us out here at the channel. Number 8. What if John Jameson had become the Amazing Spider-Man? This one is more sad than it is scary, but it has a pretty tragic ending, so I still felt it was appropriate enough to include it here. In the final story included in this What If issue, we learn of an alternate reality where John Jameson ends up becoming Spider-Man, or Spider Jameson. Instead of being reviled by J. Jonah Jameson, his father, he is completely supported by JJ, because yeah, that's his son, and Jameson Sr. knows that he's, Spider-Man. Jameson even designs John's spider suit here. However, in the end, John dies while attempting to help with the same mission that 616 Peter Parker Spider-Man ended up saving him from, leaving his father heartbroken. What a tragic ending. Died the same way he died sort of in 616, but different circumstances? Number 7. What if the Avengers had never been? This issue ends pretty darkly in a reality where we explore the future of the Avengers, who did not stay banded together after Hulk left. Instead of going to search for Hulk together, Thor has the revelation that Hulk should be allowed to leave if he would like, as, none of the Avengers have taken an oath to remain loyal forever or any such thing. Iron Man then calls Thor out for only thinking this way because he too is planning on leaving. Stark obviously has some, abandonment issues, I feel like. Thor doesn't take kindly to this retort and does leave, and so do Hank and Janet, currently known here as Giant Man and the Wasp. In the end, Hulk teams up with Namor, and Iron Man is forced to face them solo styles after trying a few times to get the team back together. Eventually, Giant Man and the Wasp do end up showing up to help Iron Man out, but sadly, it ends up being too late. During the fray, Iron Man is badly injured, and while the heroes win the day in the end, their victory comes at the cost of Iron Man's life. How tragic. How dark. Death.
Number 7. Intelligent Design God Hulk. Most comic book readers, and especially fans of Marvel and the Hulk, know of the storyline where the Illuminati banished the Hulk from Earth to send him to another planet. Now, he ended up crash landing on Sakaar and became a gladiator turned liberator turned ruler of the planet until his ship self-destructed, wiping out his family and bringing him back to Earth as one of the most powerful and angry versions of the Hulk ever. Well, in What If Planet Hulk, it ends up asking the question, what if the Illuminati's banishment had hit its original target? Because of an unforeseen anomaly and Bruce kind of losing his mind, in the main Marvel universe, Hulk was thrown off of his original course, which is what got him wound up on Sakaar in the first place. In this story, Hulk lands on the incredibly peaceful and serene planet that he was intended to, and sure, he goes a bit ragey at first, but he eventually realizes the planet is inhabited by a race of peaceful tiny little creatures, and they're super cute. Over long periods of time, the Hulk helps this race to evolve and survive against the threats of this planet, and even become a thriving civilization kinda similar to humans. They end up viewing the Hulk as their god, and he basically acts as one, leading them to wealth and prosperity and keeping them safe. Number 6. The world knew Daredevil was blind. One day, when fighting against Electro with Spider-Man, Daredevil is unaffected by a blinding flare set off right in front of his face by Electro. Now, this event kinda clues in Electro to the idea that maybe this Daredevil guy is kinda blind. And when Electro and Spider-Man ask Daredevil what color Electro's costume is, it kinda seals the deal. Electro lets the whole world know by leaking this info to the Daily Bugle after Spider-Man actually sorta makes fun of Daredevil, which is mean, saying it makes sense why he chose the yellow costume because he obviously couldn't see how bad it was. Damn, Spider-Man. The villains then begin to take advantage of this massive secret weakness for Daredevil, and while he is able to hold his own still, he eventually decides to undergo an experimental treatment that restores his sight but removes his super senses. Now, powerless, Matt Murdock and Karen Page get married and have a normal life, with Matt becoming the district attorney. So it did actually turn out pretty good in the end. Number 5. Dazzler, the Herald of Galactus. Dazzler in Marvel Comics is a super underrated mutant and mega pop star with the power to convert sound into light, which is pretty good for a musician, and especially so since she uses this power to literally dazzle people at her concerts, as well as fight bad guys with a surprising level of power and efficiency. Well, in What If number 33, Dazzler is chosen as the new Herald of Galactus, being apparently the only being who could retrieve the old Herald who had hidden himself in a black hole. Now, Dazzler does this by using her light-based powers, and then Galactus just sends him back into the black hole as like a punishment, I think? It's kind of weird, but this is a what if comic, so just go with it. Dazzler was then given a huge boost with the power cosmic, and for some reason, even with her new boosted up powers, she decides to keep the disco ball rollerblades. I don't know. She's actually really torn up about having to leave her world, but she does vow to at least do good by not letting Galactus eat inhabited planets, which Galactus actually obliges this time because it seems like he's kinda got the hots for Dazzler. I'm not joking, that's actually kind of the reason. There's a whole conflict with an armada, and then Galactus releases her to go back to Earth, which has been the victim of an apocalypse in her absence, and then she decides to go back to join him yet again as some kind of weird, twisted love story. It's really strange. Number 4, Thaddeus Hulk Ross. So it turns out that if Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross were the one to save Rick Jones from the Gamma Bomb all the way back when, and became irradiated and became the Hulk, he wouldn't last very long, like at all. That's what happens in What If General Ross had become the Hulk. Gamma affects everyone differently, as the Watcher tells us, and for the General, he immediately turned into a Hulk, but retained his intelligence only without being able to speak or handle the situations he was now in properly, like the intelligence was all internal. For example, he accidentally completely squashed Rick Jones. He stopped Igor, the Russian spy who caused the Gamma explosion, but caused untold damage in the process, and while fighting the military, he threw a tank that traveled all the way to the house of Betty Ross, his daughter. The tank he threw crushed the house with Betty inside. He then unknowingly went to find her, as she would be able to help him with the Hulk problem, but all he found was the result of what he had done, and a weeping Bruce Banner. Ross transforms back into his regular human form, which allows Bruce to end the life of this now tormented Ross. This one's kind of depressing. Sorry. Number 3, American Civil War Captain America. I've talked about this one a lot, and I'm sorry. The story of What If Captain America starts out with our Steve Rogers and Bucky Barnes time displaced to the Civil War era. Bucky is the commander of their regiment, and he is not a good guy. Apart from being an unhealthy amount of racist, he has quite the lack of moral compass as well. Now our Steve Rogers here obviously starts out as his scrawny and less than impressive self, but with a heart of gold that shines through. Now after sustaining injuries from not following Bucky's dastardly orders, he is recovering in a nearby Union camp tended to by one Private Samuel Wilson, this timeline's version of the Falcon, taken in by the Shawnee tribe at a very young age. Sensing the goodness in Steve's heart, Wilson bestows a kind of eagle animal spirit thing on Mr. Rogers that changes you on the outside to whatever you are on the inside, if that makes any sense. And this happens just as James Barnes bursts into their location to bring them down. Now the power of this ritual blasts Barnes away, and when he recovers, he has become the White Skull, with like literally, he's the skull. And Steve has become a mystical super soldier wielding a shield and sporting a headdress. Now he goes on to save presidents and wars and leave a lasting legacy of Captain and General Americas that continues all the way up until the modern day. Number 2, Ghost Stroller Rider. What If the Watcher was a stand-up comedian is honestly the What If comic that just keeps on giving. It's pretty awesome. There are tons of weird and wild parts in this comic, but for this point, there is a full page devoted to the question of what if the Ghost Rider had possessed someone other than Johnny Blaze. And of course, instead of finding some other able-bodied man or woman, a cigarette-smoking, leather vest-wearing comedian Watcher shows us the spirit of vengeance inhabiting the body of an elderly woman in a wheelchair demanding warm milk, a rollerblade-wearing woman vowing to bring an end to disco, and an infant in a stroller. A big-headed goo-goo gaga who will hunt for vengeance after it finds someone to change its diaper. And just to make it 10 times better, this wee bab is wielding a cat, swinging it around its head as it zooms around in its Hellfire stroller. I honestly can't make it up, it's actually on the page. And finally, in at number 1, it's Heroic Dr. Doom. What would a good guy version of one of the strongest, most quotable, and most villainous villains in the pages of Marvel Comics look like? Well, other than the infamous Iron Man, in issue 22 of What If, we get to see just that. When the Victor Von Doom of this universe discovers Reed Richards looking over his experimental notes, uninvited in university, he diverts from the regular continuity, which normally sees Doom fly off into a rage and make Reed leave. Instead, Von Doom invites Reed Richards to help him out, which I think a true scientist would actually do. Now with Reed's help, Victor is able to contact his mother in the afterlife, and he learns of his royal blood. He trains in the advanced technology and mystical arts of an order of monks in Tibet and in the darkest places of sorcery, and is granted, instead of his classic armor, this really sweet golden armor, which is kind of evocative of like medieval knights, but also kind of like the Roman Empire a little bit. Or maybe that's just my male brain talking, I don't know. He uses his knowledge to free his mother's soul from the realm of Mephisto, and uses his technology and sorcery to free his kingdom from an oppressive ruler, and all goes really well. Until Mephisto comes back demanding the soul of his lover, Valeria, in exchange for the freedom of his people. Then he battles Mephisto once every year to try and save his love, similar to how he does the same for his mother in the normal continuity, only now he's widely seen as a hero. Number 10, the Fantastic Four as cosmonauts. Let's explore the what if story that begs the question of what if the Fantastic Four were Russian. Well, for starters, their names are different. In fact, they're pretty much all different. Now the UFFF, or the Ultimate Federalist Freedom Fighters, the team is made up of Rudion Richards, the commie Reed Richards, who instead of stretching can just pop off his limbs and send them out over long distances, which is way more alarming. Natalia Romanova, the 616 Black Widow, who is now Widowmaker and can control electromagnetic energy. Pyotr Rasputin, who is still just Colossus and has all those powers except his body and mind are deteriorating over time. And lastly, Pyotr's sister, Ilyana Rasputina, who seems to have the power of Sue Storm, but we only ever see her go invisible, which is way less cool than the 616 continuity. After the demise of Stalin, the team is put under KGB control, and Rudd Richards, easily the strangest member of this team, is not having it, especially after he accidentally ends the life of Giant Man while on a mission for them. Widowmaker then makes widows of the wives of the leaders of the KGB, and the superhero team goes on to fight for freedom and equality. I didn't think that's how it would go, but here we are. Number 9, World War II Space Nick Fury. 1979's What If number 14 gives us a very different approach to history. Instead of World War II being fought in Europe, it's instead fought in space. In this alternate timeline, we discovered interstellar travel much earlier in our history, and as such, the World War II that we fight is more like space sector war between Sector Alpha and Sector Beta in space. And don't ask me to define where those areas are because I can't. It doesn't even tell us. As this is still all set at the same general time as the regular World War II, some of the same characters are gonna be involved, including the original Nick Fury and his Howling Commandos. This story has new high-tech weaponry, fishbowl helmets, and aliens. It's a good bit of fun. Now we learn in the story that Admiral von Strucker is actually working with the alien Axis powers to create a quote master race. So it seems in this alternate world we can master interstellar travel, but we still can't just accept each other's differences. Number 8, Miles Morales becomes Wolverine? In this what if, we don't really get an explanation as to why, but instead of being his normal self, Miles Morales in this world is instead a mutant with the same abilities as Wolverine. And when he is younger, he is abducted alongside other children by Weapon X, who turn him into the adamantium skeleton super weapon, just like the original Wolverine, because of course that's what happens. Now fast forward a few years though, now in this world, Sentinels are being used to hunt down mutants by S.H.I.E.L.D. And after Miles takes out 3 of them, S.H.I.E.L.D. sends in this super cool looking warrior wielding an adamantium katana to take him out. This awesome S.H.I.E.L.D. warrior turns out to be Miles' father, and once he discovers this Wolverine mutant is his son, he turns on S.H.I.E.L.D. So obviously they send another assassin, Miles' uncle Aaron, the original bad guy, who seems to be doomed to be bad no matter what because he is this world's version of Sabretooth. Miles' father defends his son to his dying breath until Miles jumps in to beat Sabretooth to a pulp and almost ends him before his father convinces him not to and to instead be a hero. And then the X-Men show up to recruit Miles, led by a Professor X who is actually Genki Lee, the original Miles' best friend for some reason. It's weird, but it's cool. Number 7, Iron Man the Traitor. In one of the first ever what ifs, when Iron Man is famously captured and forced to create weapons, he still creates the Iron Man armor, but the change comes when instead of booting up and busting his way out of where he is being held captive, the boot up sequence takes just a bit too long, and Yinsen's sacrifice doesn't buy Tony enough time. Tony is found and restrained before he can do anything. Now that he has been found and this new weapon, the Iron Man armor, is discovered, the leader of the terror organization, Chen Lu, plants a device in the arc reactor that keeps Tony alive, but that allows him to shut it off remotely if Tony doesn't do what he says. And he implants a communication device in Tony's skull so that Chen Lu can spy on and control Tony. Then he lets him be discovered and sets him free. Now, thanks to the fact that he can now control Tony, he forces him to become a hero like he would have anyways, gain the trust of the superhero community, and then he learns secrets pertaining to S.H.I.E.L.D. But it's once Tony is ordered to dispatch Reed Richards and goes to complete the mission that it's revealed that Tony had been recording a tape by speaking incredibly slowly, and he sent that tape to Reed, who, when he played it at a faster speed because he's super smart, he learned of the situation that Iron Man was in. Once their fight began, Iron Man eventually got, quote, incapacitated by Reed, who actually helped him remove the device inside Tony's heart, giving Tony the chance to get his revenge. Now, for a short and somewhat silly what-if story, it's actually really good. Number 6, New Fantastic Four. What If This Was the Fantastic Four is a comic that was a tribute to illustrator Mike Wieringo, who unexpectedly passed away while working on this story. And even if that wasn't the case, it's still actually one of my favorite what ifs. The original Fantastic Four is brought to an end by the Skrull agent Delilah, and in their place, a team of 4 other heroes step up to the plate, if not with a bit of reluctance. Spider-Man, Wolverine, the Incredible Hulk, and Ghost Rider. Now, Ben Grimm was the only member of the original team who survived, and at their funeral, he gave this new team his blessing while he went off to raise Franklin Richards. This new team came under attack from cosmic beings who seemed to sense that the Earth lost one of its major teams, but this was all orchestrated by Dr. Doom, as I'm sure no one is too surprised by. Thanks to Ghost Rider's inclusion on this team, Mephisto uses Doom and possesses him, and creates a team of the hero's villains who are power boosted with infernal magic. It's Venom, Abomination, Sabretooth, and Sandman. This fearsome four, as they call themselves, do battle with the new team of Fantastic Four members, eventually being defeated, revealing the Mephisto-possessed Doom, who almost destroys the team until he's stopped by a combined effort of the citizens of New York, and Spider-Man, utilizing the disruptor that finished off the Fantastic Four in the first place, saves the people of New York, saves Dr. Doom, and he saves the day, because it's Spider-Man. Number 5, Man-Spider. Okay, so in this story, everything that happens to Spider-Man is exactly the same. Oh, except I left out the extremely important detail that in What If number 8 in 1978, this isn't Peter Parker, it's actually Webster Weaver, an anthropomorphized spider in a world of other animal people. Oh, yes, and he gets bit by a radioactive human, giving this spider the proportional powers of a human. Apart from that, and the villains being hilarious alternate versions like Marvin the Hunter, Culture Vulture, Rude Rhino, the Green Gobbler, King Pig, Octodoctopus, and Leaping Lizard, everything is just the same as it always is, until one day Reyes, the bug spray baron, threatened to destroy the ozone layer unless he was given $1 trillion. It turns out that Reyes is actually the guy who defeated Webster's Uncle Ben, or Uncle Bug as he's called in this comic. Man-Spider saves the day, Reyes is destroyed, and he swings back home to Aunt Mayfly. It's lovely. Number 4, the Fantastic Four with different powers. The Fantastic Four are known as the first family of Marvel Comics. Reed Richards, Sue Storm, Johnny Storm, and Ben Grimm combine great intelligence, sterling courage, and a staggering array of powers, making them one of the most powerful superhero teams in comics, and also one of the best families around. 1977's What If number 6 shakes things up by reimagining a world where the four acquire different sets of powers. This sets them on a dramatically divergent path. The story sees Reed, Susan, Johnny, and Ben subjected to the cosmic radiation that fans know gives them their powers, but this time around, Johnny becomes a living robot, Ben sprouts giant dragon wings, and Susan gains the ability to stretch her body to great lengths like Reed could. Reed? Well, he kinda draws the short straw. He's transformed into a bodiless brain. The explorers band together as the Fantastic Four, but Reed's nature as a disembodied organ kinda leads to some problems, as you might suspect. Susan grows closer to Ben instead of Reed, and Reed despairs of ever getting her to love him again. Dr. Doom soon takes advantage of Reed's state by stealing him away for his own ends. Now, after a thrilling battle, Reed and the others manage to overcome Doom. Reed also manages to transfer his mind into Doom's body somehow. This means this new Fantastic Four consists of a winged Ben Grimm, stretchable Susan Storm, metallic Johnny, and Reed alive in the body of Dr. Doom. Kinda crazy. Number 3, Wolverine Punisher. What about the what if where Wolverine became a kind of Punisher? In this story, we're in 1920s Canada following a Wolverine who doesn't seem to actually have claws, or if he does, he barely uses them. He does seem to have his healing factor and senses though. Whatever his powers are, we find out he has a son with a lady who, works at a bar. He is forced to take responsibility for both of them and makes friends with the barkeep. But that all comes to an end when they are all brought to an end thanks to a fire caused by a man named Scarface who fled to Chicago. Now obviously Logan isn't going to just let that go. He tracks down the villain, and with the help of his friend, and all while wearing a skull and crossbone flags on his chest, he wields big bang booms and never pops his claws if he actually has any, but he looks totally amazing as he takes that guy out. It's also an incredibly weird twist on a version of Punisher, but admittedly a little more disappointing than I might have expected it to be, and I'm sorry if you get disappointed by it. Number 2, Hassenwald. Honestly, I'm not even sure how this makes sense, but in this What If comic, Marvel exists as a comic book company that writes all the same comics it normally would, including comic books about Ghost Rider Robbie Reyes, and that's important because he also happens to be an intern at Marvel, but is also still Ghost Rider. I don't know how it works. I never said these things need to make sense. What is honestly even weirder than that though is that the studios of Marvel are being visited by this Nordic death metal band called Hassenwald from Latveria, who have fun clubs all over the world, including in Wakanda. Oh, and they also have been accused of witchcraft, church burning, and eating people, which turns out to be true, as while they are visiting Marvel, they take out the donkey that runs the printing press and use it to create a possessed Ghost Rider comic that turns the world into a hellscape, making them the ultimate rulers of it, using the power of the old gods to do so. I don't know. Now, Robbie Reyes is trapped in this world where Hassenwald has dispatched the Marvel Universe and he needs to save it, I think? I don't know. After reading it though, I needed to sit down, so. And finally, in at number 1, Thanos joins the Avengers. In 2015's What If Infinity Thanos number 1, we meet a version of the Mad Titan who willingly teams up with the Avengers to take down the Builders, a race of super beings from another reality who wish to end the universe. Of course, Thanos' desire to become one of the Avengers ultimately turns out to be self-serving, but Captain America realizes this too late and he falls in battle to the Purple Menace. Thanos tells the other Avengers that Cap passed at the hands of the enemy, which the other Avengers accepted. He becomes a solid part of the team, albeit one kept hidden from the rest of humanity. Now, Thanos' mere presence appears to infect the other heroes with this kind of evil persona. In the story's epilogue, we see Tony Stark, Reed Richards, and Doctor Strange mulling over the possibility of beings like the Builders attacking them again. Now, this is when Thanos makes his presence known once more. He offers to help Earth's heroes destroy other worlds in the name of defending their own, kind of like in the Incursions. Kind of a downer.
For those who don't know, the What If stories have become a Marvel staple. Specific events have had their own limited series just imagining what if scenarios, and we've also had a few lengthy and successful run on just one-shot single what if issues themselves. If you're a DC fan, Marvel What If stories are sort of similar to the wackiness of DC's Elseworlds, and today we're going to be taking a closer look at just how weird some of these stories really can get, as we count down the top 10 weirdest Marvel What If comics. Get ready to get gloriously and amazingly weird and strange with me, in ways that only the unlimited creative minds at Marvel in the 70s and beyond can allow. And let's get counting. Number 10. What if Aunt May was a mutant with claws? I just love how this is posed as a scenario where Aunt May just uses her claws in place of the good old-fashioned parental guilt trip. Aunt May is having dinner with her nephew Peter and his girlfriend Mary Jane. She cooked for them and they immensely enjoyed their meal, but when she offers them a pie for dessert, they both insist they're just too full and they cannot eat another bite. They offer that after their date, they're going to see a show, they might have a slice upon their return. But this isn't good enough for Aunt May. Fortunately, in this story, she has Wolverine claws, which she snicks out and uses to intimidate the youngsters into postponing their date so they can stay for dessert. She uses her claws, of course, to also slice the pie, because Aunt May. What else is she gonna use them for? Although I would really love an alternate world where Aunt May just was Wolverine. Or I was posing earlier an idea of an alternate world where everyone is Aunt May. What about that world? Number 9. What if Iron Man, demon in an armor? Remember that time Tony Stark and Victor Von Doom swapped bodies? Oh yeah, that's the thing that happened in this What If special out of 2010. Here both brilliant minds were roommates in college and Victor used a machine on Stark to swap minds with him. Stark's memories were also wiped, so he never knew he had been Tony Stark. Victor, as Tony, used his millions to create his own inventions, but ultimately ended up ruining the Stark name with less than noble pursuits and his own greed. On the other hand, Stark as Victor succumbed to alcoholism but recovered and then created Doom Industries, a brilliant company responsible for its own Doom armor suits and technological advancements. In the end, Doom in Stark's body attempted to attack Doom Industries but was apprehended by Stark in Doom's body. He then revealed the swap that had taken place years earlier and bargained to swap back in exchange for his freedom, but Stark in Doom's body is just like, nah thanks, I kinda have the better company and life now in your body. I like this body. Why would I want to be Tony now when I can just be the honorable Dr. Doom? Good point. Good point. Why would you ever want to be Tony Stark when you could be Dr. Doom? That's the real question. That'd be awesome.
Their signature looks were kept so the public knew who was fighting for them. Only of course it went wrong. The cybernetic sentinels started breaking down due to an overload of info in their brains and began focusing on their single goal, saving mutant kind. Any threat to mutant kind, even people, had to be eliminated. Is Cyclops still Cyclops if every piece of him is eventually replaced? I think not, but let me know what you think down below. There was once a Cyclops that worked under the Professor X that became Juggernaut. He existed on Earth 905 from Marvel's What If 13. This universe looked pretty bleak for humans. Professor X turning into the Juggernaut caused this whole chain of horrible reactions that led to the Professor crawling out of the rock, a supreme control peacemaker. Mutants ran everything and humans spent their lives pretty much just living in fear. The Cyclops in this world is married to Jean with 3 kids and he is still the kind of guy to stand up for all things right and good. So he realizes that humans shouldn't have to live like this and leaves the Professor Juggernaut's X-Men. So the powers, morals, and love life are pretty much the same as the Scott we know, but this Scott has a different helmet. Instead of the sleek helmet we are used to, he has a bigger one with these like horn looking things. The Cyclops and X-Men go up against the Professor Juggernaut X-Men and win. Juggernaut gets literally launched into space. There is a reality where everything is the same, but all mutants are of African American descent, including Cyclops. It's Earth 63 and it's super new. It was dreamed up in 2023's Bishop War College. Lucas Bishop accidentally ended up on Earth 63. He gets transported straight to the front gates of Earth 63's School for Gifted Youngsters and remarks that he had seen it all, but was even shocked by the sight in front of him. Scott Summers and Jean Grey are standing right in front of him, and their outfits are very similar to what they usually wear. They just have Wakandan design influences. As far as I can tell, the only difference between this Cyclops and our Cyclops is their history. Otherwise, it's the same powers and everything like that. Cyclops was once on a Deadpool-led team of X-Men. This version of Cyclops was glimpsed in Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe issue 4. When Deadpool is jumping around through the nexus of all realities, we see a bunch of different Deadpool variations. One of them is a Professor X-Pool. Professor X-Pool is flanked by Cyclops and Iceman. I don't really want to imagine the implications of combining Professor X and Deadpool, but Cyclops in this universe looks almost exactly the same. The one difference is his super costume is showing a bit more skin. He almost looks like he's wearing a tank top, and I wonder if Deadpool had anything to do with that. There is a Scott Summers out there known as Psych. He comes from the year 2000, originating in the Big Town comics. This world is known as Earth 110. In this universe, Summers presumably has all the same powers. He is still seen wearing his visor. His outfit looks a bit different. It has what looks like a V on the chest and some enormous shoulder pads. Psych was part of a gang of mutant thugs called the Mutts. They worked out of and controlled Newark, New Jersey. On Earth 616, Professor X and Cyclops are super close. The Professor is like a father to Cyclops. They are a super important relationship in the comics. However, in fact, on Earth 110, they are more likely to scrap with each other. The Mutts often fight with the X Squad. They did fight alongside them once out of necessity when Dr. Doom attacked. After the allyship was over and Dr. Doom was defeated, the Mutts were offered the opportunity to join the super team, the X Squad. However, they refused. There's a Cyclops out there with his eyes positioned vertically instead of horizontally. The first issue of Howard the Duck Volume 6 showed a brief appearance of Cyclops, but he looked a little different. His visor was vertical instead of horizontal. That implies that his eyes were vertical instead of horizontal. We don't know if this is just another mutation that Cyclops has and he's the only one, or if everyone in his world has it, we only see him. In the panel where we see him, this guy opens a wizard portal that shows a bunch of different universes. So we also see an evil Squirrel Girl, a Spider-Gwen Batman, scraggly Captain America, and Duck Iron Man. This Cyclops doesn't have a known universe designation because he's only been seen that one random time. Marvel gave us the gift of an Elizabethan Cyclops. His name is amazing. It is Scotius Summerisle, and he is a witch breed. This takes place in 2003's Marvel 1602. The entire comic takes place in the last bit of the era, and literally everybody is there. I love it when Marvel writers have fun. The backstory for Scotius is that he worked on boats as a kid until his witch breed status was revealed. When that was found out, he wasn't treated very well, but before anything permanent happened, Scotius was found by Carlos Javier to go to his school. Also, Professor Carlos calls the team his mutantor. Iconic. He still met Jean Grey and fell in love with her, but she had to pretend to be a man. It was a whole thing, don't ask. On a mission, Scotius and Roberto, or Iceman, save Angel from the Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition. In this world, Scotius doesn't really have a visor, it's more just like a pair of cool sunglasses. Overall, I gave them a 10 out of 10, especially Scotius Summerisle. Cyclops looks like a prince already, and he actually was one once. In Uncanny X-Men 153, or Kitty's Fairy Tale, Cyclops plays the noble prince in the story Kitty Concocts. It's a fitting role for the X-Men. He rules over a faraway land and was set to marry none other than the enchanted princess Jean Grey. But then the kingdom was under attack, and Jean allied herself with the primal cosmic forces to save the city, but they made her turn evil, turn into the Dark Phoenix. It started slowly, but eventually the once gentle princess became evil and cursed her friend and fiance. In this world, Jean gave Scott his eyes of death, as they are called there. The prince and wizard Xavier fled the kingdom together, the wizard giving the prince his fancy blindfold. The pair continued to track the evil princess. Their mistake, she attacked them once they found her, or she found them. The other members of the X-Men get picked up along the way. There is a big final battle like all the X-Men comics have, and then Jean Grey's pure soul takes over, returning the evil Dark Phoenix soul to the primal energies of the cosmos. When the Phoenix is gone, Cyclops' eyes return to normal, him and Jean get married finally, and they all lived happily ever after. The Monkeyverse is Earth 8101. It's apparently very similar to Earth 616, aside from all the monkeys. Monkey Cyclops is on the X-Simians. They fought the Beyonder to make this already wild world even wilder. There were vampire invaders at one point, and Monkey Cyclops had to help fight them off. He did so using all the same powers that 616 Cyclops has access to. The Monkeyverse has only shown up a handful of times, mainly in Marvel Apes volumes, which is unsurprising to say the least. I think Monkey Cyclops looks pretty interesting, and I would love to see more of him.
Number 10, Age of X. There isn't really an exact X-Men team in this reality, but there are the Force Warriors, so I guess we could consider them as an X-Men alternate? In Age of X, we learn of Earth 11326. Here, there was no Professor Xavier to bring mutants together, uniting them. As a result, anti-mutant sentiments grew, and following the Phoenix disaster, mutants were on the brink of extinction in the US, thanks to national and honestly global persecution. However, some were able to rise up and join the Mutant Liberation Front, fighting to protect their kind. Eventually, the mutants were unified by Magneto, who brought them together at a place he built called Fortress X. During the siege of the fortress, each night barriers protecting the place would be rebuilt by the Force Warriors, a team of psionic mutant powerhouses including Legion, Hellion, Betsy Braddock's Psylocke, Carmela Unnasion's Standoff, and finally, Rachel Summers' Revenant. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and if you love when we talk about alternate versions of alternate characters, well guess what? We got a whole playlist filled with that, so you can go check that out and learn even more. Number 9, Witch Breed. The Witch Breed hails from Earth 311. They are mutants of that reality. Witch Breed is a term given to anyone who basically kind of has powers in that reality, but while some of these characters are villains, not all of them are bad. In fact, the Witch Breed team is made up of mutants who attempt to help others, who are good, and yet who are mistreated just because of who they are, like them. The Earth 311 reality is known as 1602, named after the year its set in. The team here is led by Carlos Javier, and members include the Angel, Hal McCoy, Petro, Sister Wanda, Scotty is Summerisle, Roberto Trefusis, and Jean Grey, who is disguised as a boy and going by John Grey. Number 8, Hellions. Okay, so this one isn't technically an alternate version of the X-Men, but they are from the main continuity. But even discounting that, because I have talked about main reality alternate versions of the X-Men in the past and included them on my list, counting them according to my own self-defined parameters for the list, this team also isn't technically a version of the X-Men specifically. They're just a different mutant group in the main continuity. But I love them so much, and they are a mutant team, and they certainly can be scary if you get on their bad side. Hellions is a team that was made up of those mutants that Krakoa didn't quite know what to do with, considering them too troublesome to deal with. As such, Mr. Sinister suggested that they band these problematic, less stable mutants together, petitioning to have them as his own team that he could then, rehabilitate. Use! Under the leadership of Conan, who goes by Psylocke, herself considered a somewhat problematic mutant due to her past and her weird connection for many years with Betsy Braddock, who is now Captain Britain. This team is probably one of my favorite mutant teams I have ever read in the comics, and despite them all kind of being scarily unhinged at the start, I came to love every single member of this team by the end of this series. This version of the Hellions includes Wild Child, Orphan Maker, Nanny, John Greycrow, Havoc, and a former member of Emma Frost's Hellions, Empath. Number 7, Naughty X-Men. I don't know, just the idea that this team exists out there in the multiverse kind of scares me. It's not so much that these X-Men were created to be a sexy variant. It's more that they hail from the bizarre world of the Mojoverse. But also, think of the ratings! Initially, I of course thought that Mojo had created them solely for that purpose, but apparently he did not. They were simply an alternate version of the team that auditioned to replace the Earth 616 team after they seemingly died. Even Mojo wasn't feeling it and ordered them to be dumped, likely implying that they should be permanently removed after they auditioned for him. Number 6, Marvel Zombies. What makes the Marvel Zombies reality version of the X-Men so scary? How about the fact that most of them were killed off and those that did survive became bloodthirsty zombies? I think the idea of that should be enough to make your blood run cold. Marvel Zombies is a brutal reality known as Earth Z or Earth 2149. While we don't know much about what this world was like before the zombies arrived, it's expected that for the most part it was pretty similar to Earth 616, except for a few minor differences as far as I can tell. The X-Men end up getting attacked early on by Alpha Flight, and those members of the team that survive then go on to fight alongside one of the last standing mutants of the living, Magneto, who becomes sort of like their new leader in this reality. Also, I gotta say, you know you're in some bleak reality when Magneto becomes the leader of the X-Men. I feel like I have yet to see a reality where he leads the X-Men that is without some extreme element of darkness, other than of course the main continuity. Number 5, Dark Reign. During the Dark Reign event, we didn't just have a Dark Avengers team. We also had a Dark X-Men team as well. Dark Reign was an event that happened in 2009. It followed Secret Invasion. After Norman Osborn was broadcast on live television taking up the threat of the Skrull Queen, Varanki, who led the Skrull invasion of Earth, Norman was celebrated as a hero. Surprised? I know. He was made the head of the organization created to replace S.H.I.E.L.D., which at this time was fully debunked. Norman named his organization Hammer and created his own Dark Avengers team. As with his Dark Avengers team, the Dark X-Men team members were also selected by Osborne, for the most part anyway. The team included Mystique, Emma Frost, who was Black Queen at the time, Namor, Dawkins Wolverine, Mimic, Omega, Cloak, and Dagger, who have both been, I think, disputed mutants in the past, and the alternate version of Hank McCoy, known as Dark Beast, who hails from the Age of Apocalypse reality. Number 4, New Dark X-Men. Madeline Pryor leads this new team of Dark X-Men. The team was put together by her when she felt compelled to take action. As Madeline says to Havoc in issue number 1 of Dark X-Men, "You should know by now that I'll wage war against anyone if I think it's just." Donning her new Crown of Mercy. Yep, Maddie gets her own team of X-Men in the second volume of Dark X-Men, which began just this year in 2023. As of issue number 2, the team has grown to include Havoc, Gambit, Maggot, Azazel, Monet's brother Marius St. Croix as M-Plate, New Mutant Feint from Children of the Atom, where she was formerly introduced as Gimmick, and Zero, who actually possesses Wolverine's android clone, Albert. What a weird, wacky series. I really need to add this one to my reading list. Sounds great to me. Number 3. Gamma Earth. The fate of the X-Men here was tragic, hence why I'm including them here on my list. They hail from the reality we get a glimpse into in Donny Cates and Ryan Ottley's Hulk series from 2021, and it's issue number 5. Here we get to see what a future world is like after it has been fully gamma irradiated thanks to gamma bombs that went off the world over. This is because in this reality, Banner was able to test the bomb, not needing to actually save Rick Jones. As such, the bomb testing continued to the point that the weapon was perfected, handed over to the US military. They used it to do things like wipe out all mutants, considering them a threat. Yikes. Number 2. Reichsmen. The Reichsmen come from a world where Germany and Axis won during World War II. They made their first appearance in Excalibur Weird War 3, issue number 1, and they are about as weird and disturbing as you would imagine them to be. This reality, Earth 597, is also home to the disturbing alternate version of the Excalibur team known as the Lightning Force. The Reichsmen are led by Herr Moira McTaggart, Reichsminister of Genetics, with the team including alternate versions of Havoc, Psylocke, Rogue, Storm, and Banshee. Number 1. Days of Future Past. This X-Men team did not fare so well, so they literally reached back into the past to get help so that their future could be prevented from ever coming to pass. In this reality, known as Days of Future Past, named after the story it appears in, or as designated reality number Earth 811, mutants end up being hunted down by Sentinels who take over. Not only are the X-Men almost all gone or dead or otherwise locked up and contained for being mutants, as well as all of the mutant population, stripped of their rights and freedoms, but non-mutant superheroes were also wiped out as well. It's truly a bleak reality. This team of X-Men is able to get a message back to their past selves thanks to the help of Wolverine, who breaks them out, giving Rachel Summers and Kitty Pryde in this timeline enough cover for Kitty to travel back in time through her own consciousness.